Welcome everyone to the Writers Lounge podcast, episode 15. Today we have Kite, Water Dark, and your average peasant. Hello everyone.
Hello.
Hey,
Hello.
hey.
Greetings.
Yeah. So today we're going to be covering pretty. It's okay. So this topic, I think, is interesting in a couple of ways because especially the stuff, kind of the websites I've been on, and kind of like the crowds that I'm kind of run into because of the like the media I like because I think anime and that stuff is the Isekai, basically Isekai genre, and just kind of like our thoughts on that. So that's like the main topic today. I don't know. I think it was Val who put this topic down. Usually, I like to have the person who put the topic down have a talk about it, like kind of introduce it. Since you got hair, I'll do the. I guess a quick introduction of the topic. So, I think isekai genre in general is just about someone who has come from one world and gone into another world. I think generally that's what it is. What tend to I think be more the trend now is someone dying and then go like dying in their world and entering another world. And I think the main thing I guess nowadays is like the power fantasy side of things. Um, so yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Um, Beyond that, it's beyond that it's just I think beyond that it's gotten really popular, especially like I think in like light novels and in anime. Um, yeah, but beyond that, I think I was gonna probably go across and hear everyone's thoughts in it before I really kind of like give my take, so to speak. So if anyone wants to take the floor, you're welcome to.
I'm personally not that big of a fan of most isekais because there's a lot of tropes that come back over and over, and it already starts with the title actually, which is often like this absurdist long title like I got hit by a truck in the real world and now I'm the king of dragons or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, but of course, this is not always the case. But I do notice a pattern with it, and that's kind of what annoys me, what turns me off.
Mm,
But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe Isekai is great.
I think
Yeah,
yeah.
I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Yeah, I know. I think the genre itself is the idea and the genre itself is really good. It's just I think what because we're around certain I guess genres like into like anime and light novels, and they've saturated it to the point of just let it being really super generic. I think that's the reason why it doesn't seem as good as it can be. Like for example, there's a good few isekai which I would say is just they're genuinely really good. They're just genuinely good stories. You can even it's not even an argument. Like there's been isekai before. I guess before I've been aware of the term isekai in Western stuff even. So it's not necessarily the genre itself. It's just how it's been marketed, especially in the stuff we kind of around the circles of around the circle of stuff I kind of enjoy. I think that's why it kind of stands out as yeah, it's a bit a bit generic. But I think a few isekai I really like was ReZero, uh Mishoka Tensei, uh what was it? Ascendance of a Bookworm, and I think even was it? There's a slime one. I forgot. Weekend is a slime. It's probably I think I had a different name for it, but there are ones that they do the genre like really well in one way or another. I think most of the ones at least personally the ones I like what I like about them is because I think one bigger problem with this genre is a lot of them kind of they do the whole go to the other world, but the like their past lives just almost seems unimportant. The only real relevance that backstory or them dying and coming to this world is that they come from our world. So I think they just really it really just boils down to like being a self-insert character. And well, yeah, self-inserts are just, especially in books. I don't, yeah, I don't vibe with that. It's like yeah, I'm good. So I think that's the reason why a lot of them are not that good. But I think the ones I like, they them moving on to another life doesn't mean that their past is irrelevant. It's if anything, it actually shapes out how they see this world and how they interact with the world. And even like some of their past traumas and stuff. I think some of them, like my favorite ones, is when they have baggage from their past and it actually affects them. And it's if anything, it's like it's something they are learning to move on from in that world. That's when that's when I think it's the genre's kind of it's being used at its best. But yeah, a lot of them don't do that.
So I kind of want to bounce off of why isekai might come across as generic for most people nowadays, and I don't really think it's the fault of the genre itself, because the thing is, people's perception of isekai nowadays is usually informed by the MMO solo leveling, that kind of deal. It's normally informed by video game mechanics, and that's kind of become something of a shorthand for the perception of isekai nowadays, whether you're dealing with shield heroes, you're dealing with Sword Art Online, or you're dealing with is it wrong to pick up girls in a dungeon, or maybe to a lesser extent Konosuba. But Konosuba is a parody, and I'm going to get to why I feel Konosuba is definitely one of the highlights of this little subgenre that we have these days. So to kind of take it back to the beginning, or what the definition is supposed to be, it's the idea of going to another world away from the world that you're in. And like you mentioned, Nate, the problem with a lot of isekai is that once the main character transfers over to the other side, a lot of, or pretty much their entire life doesn't really have much of a bearing as to where they are now. Now, some of their experiences can inform some of the choices that they make, but if you were to pretend that the other world didn't exist and the main character was likely always here, chances are you're probably not going to feel much of a difference. So this is what I feel is the problem with a lot of isekai, or a problem that any isekai can fall into. So if I decide I want to take it a little back for a bit further, let's go back to the 80s and the 90s for a minute. So the two exemplary examples that I have as far as isekai is concerned is Escaflowne and, of course, Inuyasha. Now, what both of these series have in common is that they both feature a high school girl getting thrown back either into a feudal era or a storybook-esque world featuring giant robots and mechs. The thing is, their experiences actually influence a lot of how they interact with the world. Like Hitomi's ability to perceive and look into the future, or just at least predict the future with her abilities as a fortune teller, is something that the main characters actually use to survive and get the upper hand on their enemies on a regular basis. Kagome actually has a direct connection to the world, to the feudal era, in the sense that she is a reincarnation of Kikyo, who's reborn several hundred years later in the future. So what we have here is that the two protagonists here have a direct connection to the events of this world, while a lot of their experiences still carry over from the previous world. To make things even more interesting, Kagome can actually go home at any time she wants to. She's not actually stuck in this world. She can go back home anytime she wants, and that's a bit of a unique scenario. You don't really see that for most. Like, of course, when somebody gets hit by a truck, there's not really much of a way for you to go back in that truck and go home. But what I'm getting at is there's a lot of perceived rules when it comes to the subgenre these days, where the protagonist has to be dead for us to have like a semblance of interesting drama, and I don't really think that's the case. I don't think it's necessarily a rule. You don't necessarily have to die to go to another world, and we've seen it many times before. Hell, if you wanted to make the argument, you know what else counts as an isekai? Digimon. If you wanted to stretch the definitions, hell, I don't think you have to stretch it that far. You'd probably argue that Digimon is an isekai in and of itself. As long as we have a world that is separate from the one that we know, and our characters interact with it in some meaningful way, or at least can find some way to go back and forth, I don't think there is much of a limitation as to how isekai can be done. The problem is that there is a there is something of an abundance of the typical, you gotta die, you go here, there you go.
No, that's very true. That is very, very true. Because yeah, it's interesting how that's
What
become
I
such a
also
big
want
trend
to
now.
add is that I don't think isekais are always a self-insert, or at least the ones we discussed before. Um,
Oh no, for fuck's sake, what's going on?
to a character that comes from our world and is also baffled by a thing he or she sees. And I think that plays into it as to why we see that trope a lot.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't. I think my connection went off a little bit, so I didn't catch all of that. Um, sorry. We can say that one more time.
Um, yeah, sure. So what I was saying is that I don't think the isekais we spoke before, like getting hit by a truck and getting into another world, are always self-inserts. Aren't always self-inserts.
Yeah.
Because it's also a thing with narration, I think. It's easier to follow if the person who goes to that world just goes from our world and has like no knowledge of the world they're being sent to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you brought up a really good point. And another good example of this is actually Final Fantasy X. The thing is, it really is easy to kind of just assume that most isekai go on the basis of a self-insert, and that's not always completely inaccurate. But the thing about these kind of stories is that you need to be able to ground the character in the setting. And of course, on top of the character, you need to be able to ground us, the audience. So the character can become something of an audience XP so that they can actually communicate with the world in the same level that we are. We don't know what's going on. So it's up to the protagonist to find things from their perspective, and then it gets translated into what we can follow. So if a character might seem a little bit bland or they're just going through the motions, 9 times out of 10, it's just to make sure that we as the audience can understand what's going on. Now, that's not to say they have to be completely passive, though, because the one thing that 10 does that I find fascinating is that despite the fact that Titus is there learning how Spira works and everything else, what the character does is that he challenges the conceptions of this world on a regular basis. If he doesn't agree with some cultural thing that they have, he's the first person to open his to shout out about it. So when you have this situation, you have a protagonist that is not only interacting with the state of the world, but they're actively challenging it because the perception that they have grown and developed in theirs is conflicting with the reality that they're in right now. So I think you can more than definitely get away with a character that might come across as a little bit of a blank slate initially, but not so much of a blank slate to the point where the only personality we can get is to project ourselves on top of them.
Yeah.
I mostly mean that this character has no conception of how this world works. So now they're trying to understand it the same way that we are.
Yeah, like, I think understanding the word and everything, that's perfectly fine. What I meant by blank slates is more. It's kind of like, I think you're just kind of saying it's just their past almost just seems irrelevant. Them coming from another world is it's very, very surface level. It's just they come from our world, and almost everything after that is just doesn't seem like relevant. That's what I mean by that. But yeah, everything else, yeah, you're right on money, 1,000%. Yeah. Okay.
Right. And go on.
Oh, no, I was.
Was
No, I've obviously finished what I was gonna say about that. I think beyond that, we did kind of talk about the other time. Like, I think like even like parodies of isekai is interesting because it's kind of like parodies, just kind of like being self aware of the tropes and kind of having a laugh at them. And I don't know what name the one Val showed the other day about the truck. Like, I haven't read much of it at all, but just the idea is kind of like kind of funny, but it also goes to show like how much this genre is kind of got its own thing going on, where it's like you can someone's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna make a whole isekai thing about the truck drivers that kill these guys, which I think is really interesting. Beyond that, yeah, beyond that, I got nothing else more to say about it. Oh, no.
I guess I could chime in as well a bit. Slight tangent, but
Mm.
at least in Isekai, right? Like if you think about like the old versus new Isekai, right? Old is like Inuyasha, 12 Kingdoms, Escaflowne, and I feel like there's one more I want to remember. I feel like they were definitely a like at that time it wasn't really as popular, right? It was just kind of a concept used to kind of progress the plot.
Mm.
Oh, yeah, Magical Knight Ray Earth as well.
Yes, that's.
Essentially,
I knew I was forgetting one.
yeah, no, I just mentioned it just because it just came to mind. But essentially, it's about a group of people being transported to another world. Usually, they have a purpose there, which also is important. Um, like for example, Kugon, I guess with Inuyasha, like it's a whole like Shikon Jewel, having to go to the past. Ray Earth is they had to like save someone. Um, what else did I mention? Escaflowne was, I guess, like plot reasons. And 12 Kingdoms was because the character originally came from a different world, essentially. So, in a way, these were some of the older not original isekai, but they were definitely some of the older ones before they became popular, and they were purposeful. That was kind of it was a major part of the plot, and it also was used to progress the story forward. It wasn't just used just for like a backdrop, if you get what I mean. It was like front and center, while in more recent times, isekai became especially popular because of Sword Art Online. I'll use that because I think after Sword Art is when it became super popular.
That's when it
And then
started to
also Mushoku
explode.
Tensei as well. And then we also have what do you call it? That Saintus one? I don't remember exactly.
Overlord.
Um
I don't know.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of the older ones.
Oh, okay,
That
Overlord.
like all came out around the same time. But like I think Sword Art the popularity of Sword Art Online definitely sparked an interest because even if it was a virtual reality world, it was still considered another world essentially.
Yeah.
Right. It
Yeah.
So
still counts and falls under the tropes. In fact, a lot of the tropes within Sword Art Online has bled into other series to the point
Oh
where they
yeah.
need, of course, their own stat windows and everything. And of course, that's a topic that another person in our group wants to discuss. So I think I'll just leave it at that.
yeah, exactly. And
Mm.
then Isekai then became more popular because of it, and then a whole bunch of titles start coming out around the same time, usually via web novels, like Overlord and blah blah. I haven't or like I don't know. There's a whole bunch. I can't remember all of them off the top of my head. And then
Yeah.
also from Isekai, there became two versions essentially. There's there's the male and female ones. I'm going to the male ones are currently more popular right now, but it doesn't mean but relatively recent the more female ones have become more popular too. The male ones usually are typically main guy is just normal dude. He dies via truck or overworking or getting shot or like some sort of form of death. Um, and he gets transported into either a fantasy world or a game world. And they're typically very, very heavily inspired by JRPGs and MMOs. Um, and there's the female ones more recently where the lady dies. Usually she's a fan of a novel or a game. And then she dies or is somehow just transported into that respective game that she liked or novel that she liked or something and is sort of forced into a position where she has to um, survive in some way. Uh, it's unclear whether what bleh. Unclear whether she wants to like what do you call it like it's not the focus is on just living. It's more like I guess the difference also is that the female ones usually they become someone else and they have to kind of live with a different body and survive usually with some sort of death flag. They're usually like a villainess or someone or some sort of nobody and they're just trying to just survive like really bad circumstances. And usually romance focus. Well, the male ones are usually themselves. They're usually not someone else. And they're kind of just doing it for the sake of living or existing. So in a way, there's the difference of intention between the genders or respective focal audiences. But it doesn't change that like both of them exist for the sake of like I think of like popcorn entertainment. It's kind of like just something that's kind of entertaining to read. every once in a while you get the more interesting ones, but if you read enough of them, these sort of all blend together. So
Yeah,
Right.
I
And
do.
if you want to take it,
Sorry. Oh no, I was just gonna say,
oh, what were you
yeah,
saying, Nate?
I was just gonna say, yeah, you're right. I think I do feel like a lot of them, and I think this is the reason why I've despite me not being the biggest fan of a lot of them, I just make peace of this. Like, you know, it is like it serves its own purpose, because a lot of them is, like you said, just kind of like it's just entertainment. It's just, you know, someone had a long day or whatever they're doing in their lives or whatever they're going through their lives, and they just want to, you know, switch off and escape. And, you know, just because I like my pots, you know, all thick and heavy and all deep and that stuff, don't mean that everyone else should like what I like. So I just kind of overall, okay, there's ones that could be done better even in that genre. I agree, but overall I've less like, oh, you know, they could, what's going on here, but it sort of thing. Yeah, because a lot of them are just kind of more entertainment.
I think for what it's worth, um, it really, yeah, that's really what it comes down to. That's one of the reasons why it's so popular. It mostly just comes down to popcorn entertainment, and that it's very easy to just consume without thinking too much about it. So it really isn't just a matter of whether or not isekai can be inherently deep or whatever, or as I would prefer to call them at this point, elseworld stories, because that's what we used to call them. The thing about elseworld stories by default is that they're supposed to immerse you into a world that is beyond yours.
Yeah.
So not only are you getting a experience through the character's eyes, you really feel like you're being transferred there. Now that's supposed to be the point for every story that's supposed to be written, when depending on who you ask. But the thing with isekai is that the idea, or just elseworld stories in general, is that it's a bit more raw there.
Yeah.
It's really supposed to immerse you far more than just picking up a book, reading a book from the perspective of a character who's always lived in that world. Basically, in a sense, it kind of makes the main character the audience surrogate. So they're experiencing the world the same way you are. So that same sense of wonder that the protagonist is feeling, also feeling that.
Yeah.
And that's why the genre is so popular for so many people. It's why stories like the Never Ending Story mean so much to people, because the world of Fantasia is just so freaking cool. The idea of you're just a kid watching this legendary hero Atreyu going through the world, and then all of a sudden you get pulled into it yourself in the follow up. It's really, really cool. It's really it's amazing. If immersion is what you're looking for within these stories, you're going to get that, and that's why they work. But the cynicism that a lot of people get with isekai really just comes down to how heavily slanted they are to like a D&D or a JRPG experience, and it gets even 10 times more frustrating for me because that genre is my bread and butter. I'm playing a game right now while we're actually talking. So I got a lot of skin in the game when it comes to just getting generally disillusioned with how much I get. Because back in the day, I would have loved this, like, no doubt. But now that
Hello?
I have a bit more, what can I say? I'm a bit meaner to the genre than most people are because I love it.
you mean isekai in general, or
Yeah, you're harsh on it because you care. That's why.
Yeah, I'm harsh because I care.
Yeah.
It just comes with the territory.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry guys, I cut off for like about a minute or two, so I'm not sure if you noticed, but yeah, I'm back now. I switched my anyway, I switched my thing on. It should be fine now, hopefully. I was gonna say something. Okay, yeah, I think I had one. Well, it was kind of a stupid joke. One of them, but it was about I was thinking, because since isekai, because obviously we read any books to escape anyways, but because isekai is almost like you're reading a book about someone escaping, wouldn't you say that's like some escapeception sort of thing? It's like you read a book to escape to watch someone else escape. But yeah, but also there was something else I was gonna bring up between that before the thing cut off. It was after that it was something you were saying about. I think it might be something. Okay, I think it might be something. It might have been something to do with games. I'm just trying to remember what I was saying. I was trying to bring. I was going to bring up after that. I think it was something to do with games and isekai. But okay, if it comes back to me, it comes back to me. All right, cool. Is there? You've got any more thoughts on it? Because I know the about the stat sheets. I guess you will leave that as well because I don't know if I was you want to definitely touch upon that. I will say one thing though. Recently, because
Right.
when I was reading when I was using Beats' work, he has stat sheets, and there was one like before I was like, okay, stat sheet's cool, and there was one part where he kind of did a thing which was related to a character, and then it showed a change, and it was related to it. Kind of related to it. It kind of correlated with the stat sheet, the changes. I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of an interesting way to go about it. So yeah, I mean, I won't say it's changed my mind, like I've been converted or changed like that in that sense, but I yeah, it just is put open my mind to think, okay, well, there are some ways you can actually, I mean, there's some ways you can actually use this in some interesting ways, narratively.
No, there's definitely ways that you can do it because like you can use like special symbols or markers on specific characters to actually throw the audience and the characters off as well. It's possible for you to use it in a way in which it does add drama. Like I'm not inherently of the opinion that having these technical aspects and the numbers mumbo jumbo is inherently a bad idea. Far from it. It can be used in a way that's compelling because, like I said, specific markers that you apply to NPCs or player characters can really make a difference on how a character is interacting with with a specific person or non-entity, depending on who you ask. So it can be done to mix up perceptions as well as to throw people off. And if you can use it, to that degree, then it's perfectly valid. Perfectly valid. The trouble is that a lot of the time it just comes across as cosmetic. That's what it is for me.
Yeah, like I guess like the player killers and Sword Art Online, I guess an example.
Exactly. Or like in
I think a lot, as you know, a lot of them. I think some of them where it works is when it actually interacts with the world. It's not just information you get as the reader, and it doesn't affect the characters in that world. I think some of them, at least some I've seen. I haven't seen much, but the some I've seen, it just felt like, oh, we're getting a stat sheet, but the characters, it doesn't seem like it's relevant to them, or they even know somebody don't even know it exists. So it's kind of there's a bit of a dissonance there. So, but yeah.
Oh, I did want to mention Konosuba before we wrapped up because I did kind of bring it up earlier. The reason why I think Konosuba stands heads and shoulders above the genre isn't just because it's taking a bit of a dump on the genre itself. It's more like it knows what its material is, and it still manages to tell a very fun and compelling story even in spite of what it has. It, for me, still manages to stand on its own, even though at the end of the day it really is just sometimes a very mean-spirited or a bit of a love letter to the conventions of the subgenre that we've all come to know. Like, for example, Kazuma's character, it's Kazuma, right? Or is it Kazuma?
Yeah, I think it's Kazuma. Yeah, I believe it's Kazuma.
Yeah. I have not watched it in a long time, so I apologize in advance. But why I like him as a protagonist is because he is genuinely a terrible human being. And that carried over from when he died. But at the same time, though, his antics are genuinely fun to watch. He's very much aware of the conventions that this world would demand and what it's supposed to mean. So he just has no secrets, ifs, ands, or buts about him. He just lives his life in the most honest and disgusting manner possible. And it just works for me. It just works. It adds a lot of hilarious interplay between the cast. You have Megumin, who is this perpetually overpowered mage, but she genuinely cannot stand the pressure of her own spells. You have Yami, who can take a beating as a tank of the party. But the thing is, when you really think about it, why would someone voluntarily want to become a tank in this world, knowing full well you're going to get the worst beatings out of the party? Well, simple. You get off on it. It's genius. It is absolutely genius. You see, that's what I'm getting at. Like, Konosuba knows the tropes of the stuff that inspires it, and it plays them off in a way that is so irreverent yet perfectly fitting that I find myself loving it, despite the fact that I'm so disillusioned with the genre. It's like it takes everything I don't like about most isekai, but not necessarily making fun of it. It's more like it takes everything I don't like, but it makes those things have meaning, and it's great. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. It's actually really funny. And I think another thing I like about it is, like, although it has all these jokes and everything, they all actually have consequences. Like the story stuff that happened before, it will come into effect later. It's like, oh, they did this before, and then later on, it has consequences. So not only is it funny, not only it actually takes a little stab at the genre, and like, especially if you know the tropes to a certain degree, you just have a laugh because it'll subvert them in funny ways, or which will make sense, but it's just really funny. But yeah, it also actually helps progress the story as well. So yeah, it is really good example of isekai. It's definitely one of my favorites as well.
I can't help but love it for that. Like, if anyone, I mean, if you held me at gunpoint and you had to ask me, Kai, do you really hate isekai that much? My response to that would always be no, because Konosuba exists and dot hack exists. So yeah, it's not like I don't. It's not like I hate the genre. I just don't like how oversaturated it is.
Yeah, I think that's the main. It's just that's one issue. I mean, it's just the main. That's the main thing. It's just obviously they found a genre that a lot of people have really just gotten obsessed with, and they're just milking it for all it's worth. Like anything they put out there. Actually, another thing. I think I mentioned this before, but it wasn't in the podcast. I think from what I understand, the reason why they have like such long titles is because apparently they don't have a blurb, right? So they kind of it doesn't for me. It doesn't. I mean, it's still kind of, but yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons why they have such long titles. It isn't really to be silly. It's just like, oh well, we need to put the whole reason why you want to pick this book up at the front of the cover. Apparently, so yeah, there's that. That kind of explains that. Although it's still a bit ridiculous. Yeah. Cool. All right. Should we move on to our next topic?
Absolutely, I'm down.
Cool.
Me too.
Cool. I want to do 5-man bands, but I want to do Shonen Lester because he brought it up. Let's see. Let's see. Oh, that's dates. Do you want to do? Do we do? I feel like do we? Actually, no. We did it. We did this a while back. I think we did something about fight scenes some time back.
I believe we did.
Yeah.
We may have talked about that at length at some point.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that I'm looking at, let's see here. Let's see if we can make this interesting. What is necessary to make a convincing romance subplot? We can talk about that, and we can probably look into boys' love and girls' love as well.
I can lead into it quite well, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, so romance, boys' love, and girls' love, and finally the strength and limitations of each narrative POV. I like those.
Cool.
Okay.
I'm cool with those.
All right. Perfect. So, which one do we start with?
Subplot romance, I think.
All right. This one is absolutely steamy. I love it. Who goes first?
I've got some thoughts in it, but I don't know because I really I got romance to some degrees in my story, but it's not at the forefront. So I need to gather my thoughts on it. So yeah, I need to gather my thoughts on it overall. Does anyone else got any thoughts on it at the moment, or?
It's more like you yourself don't really deal with a lot of romance in your work, right, Nate? Is that what you're saying?
Like I do, but I don't know. For me, like there's doing the work and just instinctively doing it, but then when it comes to like, okay, need to explain it, okay, put it into words, how would I explain it? That's where I'm like, okay, well, that's not one I really be in the forefront of my mind. I guess I could just talk spitball and see what I come up with, because I have like my main two characters, they do get romantically involved, and a few sub stories do have hints of romance in them. I find okay. I've noticed, especially looking at my work as a whole and all the plot points I have. I have this. I say pattern. I guess it's a pattern of there being like something going on, or like characters have this close bond, and it's looking like it's gonna go well. Then something happens beyond them that they're not able to like really stop or control, that will stop it from happening a good half the time. So, yeah, I find that's interesting. But I think what would make, I guess, a good subplot romance is obviously chemistry and then the development. You got to have. I think what a bad examples of ones is when they have these people have these feelings and they see each other and there's all these romantic feelings, but it's like, what do they actually know about each other? Like what's happened? Like what reason? We haven't seen a reason why they have all these feelings. They just have all these feelings now, or it just like they've seen each other a couple of times and there's nothing really. It doesn't feel like there's any real line of logical reasons why they just kind of like they like each other too much beyond the writer just said, hey, these two they're here and they're in a room and they know each other and they've looked at each other a couple of times from like across the hall. So you guys know they're in love now. I was like, really? I think I think when they not done well, it's usually because it's they kind of didn't do the build it up properly. Like they didn't have any general character interactions. I feel, but that being said, I think romance is because I think some of them can get away with making it be simple, like just a typical example, like boy meets girl, and is make it really basic, and it can sometimes like it won't be good, but the audience will be like, okay, I get it. But I think it's mainly because we as the audience are kind of inherently wired to just think, okay, well, they've made these characters look at each other, and this one, I guess, especially in anime, this one just blushed or something like that, and then this one, is acting a bit strange now. Okay, they like each other. So in some ways, I think romance, you definitely got to build up the relationship between them to make it good. But you could get away with just making it, really generic without really putting in the legwork. I actually think doing friendships properly is a bit harder, because you can't just show, oh look, this one got shy when this other guy, therefore they like each other. It doesn't translate as well for friendships. So I think friendships and that have a lot of correlation, but it's romance and friendship have a lot of correlation. But I think friendships are a bit harder. So when I do go around to like romance, I kind of think, well, okay, would they be good friends anyways to begin with? Like, have I written enough? Is there enough in here to make me feel like, okay, if these two were just weren't stuck in this situation, or were to leave from here, would they want to keep their relationship? Would they want to go do something else? Like, and I don't know, from like how I do that is just kind of how, I don't know, just I'm not sure how to explain how to do friendships, but I feel like to make a good romance, if you aim for a good friendship, you can make a great romance, sort of thing. I think that's what I'm trying to get at.
I guess so.
Yeah.
You want to go first, Dark?
I think I'll just I wanted to just talk just a little bit about it. I guess with any, I'll focus on romances first. So with any romance, right, there has to be some form of chemistry and a bit of like a back and forth. Because typically when I read a lot of romances, it's very, very one-sided. Usually there's the chase, right? There's like the one person falls in love and then they go after the other guy or other person. Or the other party falls in love and then they're trying to make the other person like them. Sometimes you get the ones where they don't like each other at all, but then they sort of grow to like each other over time. It depends on what type of romance you want to do. You could do like love at first sight. You could do enemies. There's the many romance tropes. Like they were roommates or enemies to lovers or like there's as many romance tropes as you can name, like a whole bunch of things. Um, but the core of romance, right, is to have chemistry. Like they have to be able to talk with each other, and you have to be able to, if you want to be a compelling romance, it has to be one where they either some sort of like mutual, like some sort of respect, or it has to be like developed in some way. Like they have to be able to work together in order to like reach some sort of like goal in a way. Um, I guess it's because like one thing that comes to mind is the shonen that had a really, how like some shonen aren't known for romances, by the way. I think a lot of them aren't.
Yeah, a
But
lot.
one that
Right.
comes to mind is Maggie.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes, I know that one.
so that's where the main character, I forgot his name, he was blonde. And then I think the other
Alibaba.
girl with the red hair was Morgiana,
Yeah,
I think.
Alibaba. I
Um,
believe the blonde guy's name is.
yeah, Alibaba, yeah. So a lot of people gave a lot of shit on the author for their romance because it was literally like kind of stitched together all at the very end. And they pretty much had no chemistry. It was like just I think it was just Morgiana just having a crush on Alibaba and Alibaba showing nothing towards her, so except at the very, very end. So that's like an example of a really bad one, especially in a shonen type. And also there's also the toxic ones, which I think are pretty self-explanatory. Um, Usually has like one of the worst tropes, which is usually rape, sexual assault, blah blah blah, or one person just really treating the other person horribly in some way. There's that one too.
And
Um,
of course, the everyone's beloved tsundere trope, which I already have some feelings on, and I'll probably talk about that when I chime in.
yeah, exactly. But romance is kind of complicated, right? It's not just simply one person liking another. There has to be some ideally you want some sort of journey to get somewhere where they eventually are on the same page or can like confess their feelings for each other. But like it can't just be like them just suddenly liking each other because then, you miss the journey, you miss what makes them like each other, right? Um, at least how I think about it. And then I'll just quickly just mention friendships. Like when it comes to like platonic friendships, right? It's not exactly the same as romance, but in a way the best friendships are ones where they go through circumstances together and then they gain some sort of common goal or common sides and then they become good friends, whether through like circumstances or through similar goals or similar minds of ways of thought. In a way, it's like not completely different from romance, but it's pretty much they're very similar, but the friendship part removes the like sexual attraction
Oh no, yeah, I agree. I
essentially.
think
So
I definitely agree. I think what I mean is it's because I feel it's harder to write a good friendship than a good romance. If you can get if you can get the friendship part down if you're writing a romantic couple, if you get the friendship down, then the romance will feel more believable. Whereas I think there's so much cues and so much things you can do to shorthand, oh, these guys love each other without having to actually put in the work necessarily. So you can have, oh yeah, they're
yeah,
romantically together, but it could have kind of like you said with Maggie, it could just happen last minute. But then you can say, oh sure, they like each other, and you could just kind of nod with it. Where you can't really do that with friendship. So, what I mean with that, it just there is when I was using kind of Korean friendship romances, there is a bond, and yeah, there is like they have a lot of overlap, but I think trying to do a really compelling friendship is harder. So in my head, I think so. So in my head, I just feel like if I could make a good friendship with these characters, then the romance is kind of done and dusted, so to speak. Because it's just easy. There's so much cues to make a romance, whereas they're not really that easy cues to make friendships. So yeah, that's all I meant.
I I kind of have a bit of a counter opinion to that. The thing is, whenever I'm writing relationship, whenever okay, I kind of showed my hand a little early here, but we see I don't really separate things in terms of like friendships or romances whenever I'm writing. I mostly just go with the definition of relationships. Like, what is this character's relationship with this character? And from there, what I try to do is I try to build the foundations. Like, what have they experienced together? What have they seen together? Is it possible that this relationship is founded on a lie? Is it possible that this relationship is founded on some, undisclosed feelings? Like, what is the story between these two characters? So whenever I approach romances, I typically come in with the question of, what have these characters seen together? What is the world around them looking like? Like, what is happening in their lives right now, and what is drawing them to each other? And is it possible for the circumstances that are drawing these characters together, will those circumstances bloom into what we call a romance or love? Those are the questions I ask while my characters are interacting with each other. Now, when you did mention that it can be a little bit difficult to write convincing friendships, I don't necessarily disagree with that one, because the thing is, alongside with romances, you need to be able to convince the audience that these people are friends and they actually like being in each other's presence. Now, of course, when we flip the question around, it's like, okay, so now we have all these characters with these vastly different personalities, and somehow they still manage to get along. How is that? Well, then you have to consider this question: what are the external and internal circumstances that are keeping all these people together? And despite these disagreements, why is it that we want to see these characters hook up? Have you ever noticed that the romances we really want to see are from characters who just do not seem to like each other? Have you ever wondered why people are always so attracted to those? Here's my thing. I personally don't like a lot of them because a lot of them can come across as abusive due to how a lot of them are written and how the characters are portrayed. So, the reason why we want to see these characters with different personalities coming together, it's because they complement each other in ways that the other person does not have. This person comes across as very passive, but the other person is very aggressive. But then every now and again, they both need each other to balance each other out during crucial moments. And when they come to realize that that's the kind of relationship they have the pacifying relationship, but they also have the encouraging. You then have a pair of characters who live very different lives, come from very different backgrounds, and yet they've somehow managed to find their missing pieces. The way how I see it, whether it's man, woman, gender nonconforming, or whatever, all of us are looking for someone to match our missing pieces with. So the reason why I feel the best form of chemistry that you can get with writing is when a character finds another person that fills in the blanks for those missing pieces.
I definitely agree. Especially since I think I mentioned last week, but I mentioned Al Haytham and Kaveh. They're pretty much that exact example. Two people who are very practically opposites, but due to even with their differences, they complete each other by being with each other, and it could be interpreted either platonic or romantic depending on how you see it. So,
Yeah, I know.
Right,
Oh, that's
and and of course, whenever you're writing these kind of things, there has to be like a defined point in you somewhere where you have to determine, like, how this character's personality is, how this other personality is. So then you have to ask the question of, so how do these personalities play off of each other? Because you will come to notice that people
sorry.
who are very, very loud and rambunctious will more often than not get under the skin of people who are typically more reserved. But then you have to ask the question of, where does that animosity really come from? Is it because they envy that person's behavior, they wish they were like that, or is it because they genuinely cannot stand that person as an individual? There's a lot of nuance to that, and it's typically why whenever you read a lot of fan fiction, why so many stories lean into those, standoff relationships between these characters. It's because we see a spark, we see some incompatibilities, but you know the old saying, opposites attract?
Yeah.
That's what ends up happening, because we know how these characters are under normal circumstances, but we can find some chemistry in the sense that these elements are in conflict, but yet we see some harmony in it because they neatly balance each other out. And if you ask me, that chemistry gets pretty sexy. It gets pretty sexy.
Yeah, when they
Yeah, no,
when
you're
they can
not
finally be
wrong.
together, it does. Yeah, it's kind of nice. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah,
was-
because
sorry about that.
we oh, go on. I'm sorry.
Oh no, because I wasn't sure you finished because you say you've got like a counterpoint to it, but I don't know. In my head so far, it doesn't like in my head. It's like I totally get with romance, but in my head it's like you can say this almost same thing with friendships, just minus the steamy hot attraction as part.
Oh yeah, you
So
definitely
so I don't
can.
think so. Yeah.
But
Yeah, essentially.
but you see, I got like a very weird sense of romance depending on who you ask. Like whenever I'm writing it, I try not to mystify it nearly as much as I've seen others do, because it's beautiful, don't get me wrong. I love a beautiful relationship, but my thing is, a romance at the end of the day, if you ask me, is just another phase of relationship. Like
Yeah.
I consider a friend a phase, and I consider a romance just a part of it that can kind of come along with it. So when I have my two main characters, being romantically involved, there's not that much changes between them for the sole reason of they don't really make any ifs and buts about what their personalities are. They snark at each other's expense. They find each other's weaknesses, and they will make fun of each other for it. But then when they're alone and when they're feeling sentimental, then they will lock hands and hold each other closely. But as far as this goes, though, I don't really fall back on all of that to let you know that, oh, these two are in love. I don't think it's that simple.
It doesn't.
I don't
It
think I don't
doesn't
think
decide.
going
I
for
think.
that route.
I think you mean it doesn't define them because I think that's maybe one difference as well. I think some people
Exactly.
make it define
Yeah,
them,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
like little things like either finishing each other's sentences, or little things like, I just knew you'd do something this stupid. Did you really think I was gonna let you do it by yourself? Like little things like that. It's like, I always knew you were gonna do something reckless, and I knew you were gonna run off without telling me.
Yeah.
So why don't we? So let's go together this time. Let's see your stupidity out together. I am with you.
Because in a way, like fundamentally, like relationships often are based around compatibility and how well you know each other.
Correct.
I guess is a way to put it. Like romances and good friendships usually are often among similar people or people who, like there's different levels, right? Like even with
Correct.
friends, you have your distant acquaintances, you have your close friends you've knew forever and can trust them with anything. Oh yeah, trust is also important as well.
That too. That's
Um,
another
just
aspect
mentioning
to
as
it.
well. And then with romances, it's similar too, because like I guess love is very something that could be considered very fleeting, depending on how well you interpret it. Or it's like hot and burns, or it can cool down and be cold. There's like a huge spectrum with it.
Right.
Like you have the people who do the one night stands, right?
Mhm.
Literally strangers, but they have sex anyway, right?
Right.
And then you have
Because
the lifelong couples that like married 30 years, I don't know,
Mhm.
still like each other anyway. And
And
then
there
other
has
people get divorced and for reasons and stuff. It's like there's a whole bunch of like levels that I think should be acknowledged because it's just a whole spectrum in itself. There's no real right way or wrong way.
right.
But definitely depending that's why it's more I guess a bit as you mentioned, right? Like it's good to just understand the relationships
Sorry
between
to interrupt. I need to
Yeah.
go.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
No
okay.
I'll see you guys later.
All right,
Sure.
no worries.
Take care,
All right,
Pez.
good hearing from you. Take care.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye.
But yeah.
Cool. All right, so you going? What you saying? Water? Sorry.
Oh, I just overall like both romances and friendships have spectrums depending on intensity and also depending on compatibility. Like are you able to get along well with this person? Do you trust them? Do you not trust them? There's like those type of thing. And with romance is like, what do you? I guess it's like, are you sexually attracted to them, or do you like them as a person?
Mm.
Or and then there's a few more layers on top of that. It's like they all depend on what I guess you're looking for and what you value. So.
Yeah, when you get down to the word, I guess love it can be really really a chaotic word because it can be so many things and so many different perspectives. It's almost, I think it's about like, yeah, there is, I guess it basically also means attraction, but when you get down to the nuance of it can almost mean different things to different people. So yeah, it's
Exactly.
you do have to go to
Because,
the weeds of it.
like, the thing about. You see, the irony about romance within fiction or even in life is that the concept of romance gets romanticized in and of itself
Oh yeah.
when you really think about it.
Mhm.
Because we just simply see it as simple as, oh, there's a lot of smooching, there's a lot of touchy, but sometimes it really isn't that for everyone. There's some people who are in relationships, but they do not physically touch each other often, if at all. They typically appreciate each other's company, and then sometimes that's really all they need. People's love and affection for each other gets explored differently. Like, without really going into too much of a personal thing, there is someone that I know, and we were spending a lot of time with each other, but they made it very clear to me that they're not very, very touchy feely on the romantic side of things. They don't mind my company, and they do care, but they're just not that. They just choose not to make themselves that vulnerable out of either previous experiences or this is just the kind of person that they are. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to consider whenever we're writing these romances, what exactly are the characters' feelings towards romance and how do they express themselves? Like, do they express themselves by outwardly just kind of randomly planting a kiss on you when they just, feel like it, or like the walls are closing down and they know that they'll probably never get another opportunity like this again? Like how is this going to start? How will this form? How does this end for them? Do they want to pursue this path? Are they pursuing it, but they're falling along the way? Like, there's what has to be considered above all else, if you ask me, really just comes down to where have the characters been, what have they seen, and where exactly will they go if they choose to make the leap, as it were.
No, I definitely agree because in a way, circumstances and I guess what you experience is so important because they influence your future actions. Kind of like how they say, like, if you've had a bad childhood, for example, you may also do the same thing to other people, like
Right.
be abusive as well, just because that's the only thing you knew. Um, or like, yeah, or like how, like, I guess in my family, right? How, like, there's I guess my aunt, right, and my own parents, they're like very different with how they treat their kids, right? Like, for example, my aunt, she's very, what do you call, she meant kind of like the touchy-feely type. She's like really affectionate, while my parents are a bit cooler. So in a way, everyone has their own way of dealing with relationships depending on what they value and what they care about. And that also creates different dynamics. Like, for example, if you have like a circle of people you know, right? Depending on who they are and how they treat you or how you value them, you'll treat them differently, which is why, as they say, people have different faces depending on who you talk to.
Yeah.
I think that's also important to mention as well.
Yeah, different persona. Oh, okay. Yeah. Now, I was also actually thinking when you guys talking about. Oh, hey Noah, what's up? Yeah.
Oh, good to see you. We have
Oh,
a get.
right,
Oh,
what's up?
wow.
Let's go.
And wow, it's a twofer.
How's it going, Val? How's it going?
Man,
Yeah,
I
good.
just it's a bit early for me, so I can't really
Oh, okay.
get any louder.
Alright, no worries,
Okay,
no worries.
no
Okay,
worries.
yeah, good to have you. Good to have
Alright.
you. Good to have you. We touched upon. I'll just give you a little catch up. We touched upon Isekai a little bit, but we saved some because I know you want to talk about it, and especially you want to talk about, like, I think the stat system and stuff. We kind of like held off on that. We're just middle talking about romance and love right now, and just how that works
Romances
in the
and
story.
friendships. So you may,
Yeah.
yeah, you may have some good insight into that, especially. So,
Yeah.
Okay, so what have we done so far?
Yeah. Oh, I've just mentioned. So yeah, we spoke about Isekai to some degree, but we definitely like kind of jumped off it to save because we knew you said you were coming, so we saved some parts, like especially like the stuff about stat sheets, and then yeah, right now I was literally I
Right.
think right now I was just gonna say about romance. It was also, with regards to what you're saying, Kai, it was there's also I think another part we speak about is like like compromising or like meeting like I guess a middle ground with the person you're with as well is kind of I guess is another good way of showing like you care, because obviously there's your quirks and the stuff you do, but then you know I guess in a romance, at least I don't know, maybe I'm talking more in how I understand it realistically, but I guess in stories it should correlate to a good degree. There's the quirks and stuff you have, and there's the things you like, and the things you like about them. But then when you get together, there's probably little things here and there that you either misunderstand or or causes a little friction. And I guess another thing, I guess, to show that another person cares is them probably I guess trying to meet like in the middle ground, a medium with them. Like, okay, I'm used to doing this. I do this a lot, or maybe in this case, it causes some issues here. So maybe, oh, I see they're upset about that. I'm gonna try to change, do something a bit different about that, or talk to them about that, or something like that. So I think even little things like that, like them, like not just like it's not just getting together, but also like, and also I guess accepting who they are for the most part, but also the characters being willing to change some parts about themselves to help keep things, help the relationship is also I think another important thing you can do in a story to show like there's affection there. So if that makes sense.
But yeah, and it makes a lot of sense. It's pretty much why whenever I go on this topic, or whenever I am writing a romance, I try not to make too much of a heavy distinction with it, because I just feel relationships in general are a bit too complex, as well as have so many moving parts, that just kind of trying to go with the typical romanticization of romance just doesn't really do it for me at this point. I mean, I love it when characters are, really, really close, and they're just, they're really expressing how they feel for one another. But I've just never been a fan of how Hollywood portrays it, and
Oh yeah,
even
I agree.
even how some anime portray it. I've just
Yeah.
never liked it,
Mhm.
because it's not even just a personal thing that I know. It's just that as I've been writing these past few years, I've just kind of come to realize this stuff really isn't as simple as any of that.
Yeah.
Like sometimes, I mean, just really think about it. Like opening yourself up to someone like that, that's scary. Like I don't think people appreciate how scary it is to really open your heart up to people like that, and to really comprehend what that really means, because when you're offering your heart to someone, you are literally showing your whole self. It's kind of like a cat when they're showing you their belly. Cats only do that with people they really trust. They are extremely vulnerable when you do that. The old saying is you are more likely to be hurt by the people that you love rather than a stranger. So
Yeah.
when I know that going in, anytime I have a romance going on in my story that's brewing in any shape or form, I always go back to how the character feels about opening up, what their fears are, what they're afraid of losing. The whole typical, I'm afraid to do this because I'm afraid to lose my friendship with a person. That is a real and genuine fear that I don't think enough people think about. Like,
Mhm.
it's like I want to see these characters get together, but then my counter argument is, okay, so what do you think happens when the relationship doesn't work out? Do you think they'll still be friends after all this? Because if something goes belly up, they both know what may happen at that point. They're probably going to lose everything.
Yeah.
Like, this stuff is usually all or nothing for people who are really committed. That's why this kind of thing. That's why this kind of thing needs the gravity that it needs. It doesn't need romanticization. It needs the gravity of the situation. And not every single story needs to comport to this. Just so I'm clarifying, I don't think every story has to comport to what I'm recommending. But I feel like if you want a romance that really tugs at you, I think playing with these ideas would really help.
Yeah, basically just I think also like just don't follow Hollywood. I think one big thing. I guess a good example.
Please don't.
Yeah, yeah, because they romanticize it so much, and it's so like it's to the point where I noticed that when they even do like have romance and stuff, and say if it's like a TV show and it continues next season, like they are. It's just it seems like they're unable to have anything compelling for them to keep the relationship going without it being really annoying drama. Have you noticed that as well? I think another thing is like once they reach obviously like I think what was saying before it's like a chase. So once they did the whole chase and they they've established a relationship, they're with each other. In I think a lot of stories, especially in like Hollywood and stuff, if they were to be in a relationship in a story, it's either going to go down to a dramatic path or it's just going to be really bland and dead because they just it's kind of like the dog got his tail and the dog doesn't know what to do with it. I feel that's what I feel like the writers in the room. It feels like it is. It's like with them when they deal with a romance that's been established now and all the butterflies and the stomach parts all done and they're together. It's kind of like I think they struggle to write a compelling relationship after that. To be honest. So yeah.
I definitely agree because like in a way it's like you have like in a way I guess romances specifically like it's like after like they mutually exchange or acknowledge their feelings, right? There's the follow up, right? What happens afterwards? Like for example, I think a lot of romances end usually like at the confession or whatever because I guess that was kind of the point, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But it's really not that complicated because afterwards you have to learn how to live with someone else. You have to learn to like compromise if you guys don't agree on something. They often argue, right?
Yeah.
They have to do the meeting with the family. You have to learn how to acknowledge what it's like to have children if you want children, or or in the BL or GL ones, you gotta acknowledge how do you deal with the society, how society views you. It's like it can be more complicated, right? It's not simply like a black and white thing. It's like, oh, it's they like each other, it's happy ever after, right? But that's not realistic,
It's not true, yeah.
So.
True. I also have to like bring this up since we're discussing romance as a genre as a whole. Um, there are some what do you call this? Common tropes in popular media, regardless of whether it's Western or whether it's like Eastern like media. Um, like you can sometimes you can't really avoid having to tie in, you know, um, how marketable sexual tension is to audiences.
Yeah.
And I feel like that has caused some problems with, with the general view towards romance as a genre because since sex or sexual tension is marketable, it unfortunate even though while there's nothing wrong with that, while a little bit of spice doesn't hurt nobody, like it could add flavor to romance. At the same time, it is unfortunately what also sort of cheapens the genre as a whole. Like you mentioned, like a lot of romance um shows or media, showcase to people trying to come together, and the reason for that, in my opinion, is because, you know, part of the drama includes the tension. And then by the time that you get together, it's not being explored. Sometimes the conflicts in these romances have a tendency to be shallow because the drama is usually miscommunication. I've
Oh
observed,
yeah.
and it's
Yeah.
very, it's very like, you know, it's a bit frustrating to watch sometimes because in a real life setting, you know, that's not how it always works. Like sometimes miscommunication might not be the problem. It could be a conflict of interest.
Yep.
a conflict of goals. Like you could love someone so much, but these two people have very different goals that potentially might not involve the other person or could go in conflict with the other person's point of like interest.
Mm.
And I kind of want to bring this up. I'm not sure if it technically falls under romance. But it could potentially, like how in the anime Madoka Magica, like
Mm.
Madoka, Madoka's wish, motivated by love for her friends,
Mm.
for those who are closest to her. Her her goal is to like save the world, even even if it comes at the cost of her own life.
Mm.
But then you have this other protagonist. What was her name again?
Oh,
The
I
one with
hate
the dark
that the
hair.
name. Yeah, the dark hair.
Yeah, it's been a while. Wait,
Yeah, I'm gonna know that I
yeah,
don't
the
remember, but
other
yeah, I know you.
protagonist.
Yeah, I know you're on about. If the
Yeah,
name comes back to me, I'll bring it up. Sorry.
yeah. The other protagonist, her whole shtick in the entire series is to save that one girl who made her feel welcome, who made her who she considers like her family, the most important girl, the one that she loves the most. Everything that she has done, all the crimes against humanity that she has done, is so that she could save that one girl who
Mm.
keeps dying to save the whole universe. And it's like, look, you see how you have these two people whose goals motivated by love, yet it it clashes against each other,
Mm.
and the thing is, while the intent, it seems very grand because it's a fantasy game, it's a fantasy genre in a way,
Mm.
but it the feeling of wanting to accomplish something that clashes with someone else's goal is also something that I feel is worth exploring,
Mm.
especially in anime. I've seen it happen in some Western media, but then again, because of other factors that kind of like I wish it was something more explored. Um, and I guess another thing, one more thing before I end my panel, is that um, like romance genre. I guess in anime, if we're gonna narrow it down with anime,
Mm.
most of what I've seen thus far are often associated with coming of age
Yeah.
stories. Yeah, and romance as something that is very new to someone who was like growing, not just in body but emotionally, mentally, you know um that can also like the having to deal with very confusing feelings, conflicting feelings of growing up while trying to confront feelings for someone else who might or might not be interested in them, or might be the object of someone else's affection, and that someone else being someone you're close with. This is the love triangle quadrangle genre. Um the the thing about that is, well, there was a point I was getting to. The thing about that I wish could have been explored more, like what you guys mentioned, kind of Nate
It's
and
kind of,
Ladder
it gets kind
mentioned
of like you want to like
about
because there's more
Jane.
young love. You want to guess probably more explore like the after the chase sort of thing, not just
Yeah,
the
exactly.
whole fresh. But yeah, because they do. There's a lot. I think 9 out of 10 they are just, especially in anime, it's just kind of like the chase. And to be fair, a lot of them they are meant to be young and everything. But yeah, a lot. I think I was actually gonna bring up a really good one. I think a really good example of one that has romance in there, which is it's literally I say one of my favorite anime is Clannad,
Mhm.
especially Clannad After Story. That
Based.
yeah, yeah. If you ain't seen that, see it and get your feelings hurt and
Mm.
yeah. But yeah, it's really really good.
Mm.
If you didn't see it, I guess I'll
Like,
give. I don't want to spoil it, but it does like it has especially in the first one, the first half of it, Clannad, it goes through like it has the whole like romance and bloom romance, but like there's a lot of, like I said, a good example way where it shows a reason why they've grown affection for each other over time, and then at some point, I guess semi spoiler because of the what we're talking about subject about after romance, they actually get together by the end of the first half, and the next half is them together. And I think what works with this, at least you could do it in many different ways, but what works with this one is there is still a conflict and there's still things they're learning. And I guess one of the biggest conflicts with, at least in this show, is I guess the world more so. So although they're together, it doesn't just become, the relationship doesn't just fall apart and become boring because there's nothing going on. Is because they now together and now they kind of have to work out how they're gonna do that, build their own life, and it's really good. It's just, I would super recommend checking it out.
Yeah, like I think Tomoya and Nagisa's relationship, you get to see every aspect of it. Like them getting used to living with each other, the stipulations of him becoming an adult, or of course them seeing their world changing around them. Like there are a lot of layers to After Story other than just Tomoya and Nagisa get together. Now it asks the questions of, okay, so what happens now that they're together? So now we get to see how much their world is changing. Now we're getting to see how much they're still maturing. Now we get to see just how how disillusioned you can get when you become an adult. Like you see all of that, and you see Nagisa and Tomoya just trying to hold things together in spite of how real their struggles are now, even more so that they're now living together. And things start to hit the fan real hard and real fast when Nagisa gets pregnant.
Oh boy,
so you have, it's like these are the aspects of romance and relationships that we just don't see covered enough. We just, like as soon as they just hold hands at the end or kiss at the end, that is the end of the relationship. That is as far as we need to show. Or if we even get to that point where we're just doing the whole will they, won't they nonsense, like we normally get that dynamic. We never usually see what lies beyond all of that. And After Story is one of those rare examples where we see all of it and it is real. It is raw. Like, again, without spoiling it, when I say it gets raw, oh boy, that doesn't even begin to describe how messy things get.
Yeah, like I'm not one to cry to media. I probably can count even my hand, but that hit me, man. Like it's wow, yeah.
Yeah, really like Clannad is out there. After Story is out there to destroy you. It is out there to hurt you.
It's beautiful.
Okay. Oh, sorry, I had to. I was talking to my mom.
Okay.
What did you guys just say? Because I wanted to say something, but I
I think essentially we were just saying about how the chase, like after the chase, most genres, most stories dealing with romance, they kind of peter off with the relationship once they do the chase, once the boy gets the girl, or whatever, like once they get together, it just peters off, and they don't have good. There's not much good examples of how a relationship can be done in the story afterwards. And my really good example was Clannad After Story. To be honest, I can't think of many else personally, especially in anime. So
I agree.
There's another one that I can think of. It's a lot more lighthearted than Clannad. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Surezure Children.
I've heard of it. I have never watched it though.
Yeah, it's also like really good. It's more of like one of those shows where it covers a lot of characters, maybe like an anthology of sorts. Like it explores basically every phase or every sort of relationship that happens in when you're coming of age. Like you have like a couple who's trying to get together, a couple who's already together but is trying to move to the next base, a couple that has very different personalities and struggles to like understand each other because of that. Like, yeah, I would recommend it for someone who's looking for something less emotionally
Draining,
damaging.
I guess.
I agree
but
as well.
still,
Mm.
but still shows very, very real and very interesting relationship dynamics. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm,
Mm.
yeah,
Mhm.
Oh.
I definitely agree. Cause
Oh no, can't run.
let's
Go
see.
on.
Cause I think with Clan, sorry, did you want to talk?
Oh no, no, sorry. Oh, Kai went and he came back. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Oh yeah. I wanted to chime in a bit after what you said, Val. I agree that Clanad is to be completely honest, I think it doesn't appeal to a certain group of people, which is why I actually have never seen it personally.
Ah, okay.
I think it definitely is appealing towards men, from what I've known.
Oh,
No,
oh.
Mhm.
no, I
Well,
think more
actually,
guys see it as like. Let me reword that.
no, no,
A
no.
lot of guys
I
say
don't
for
think
their
you're
favorite
wrong about
anime.
that. I think you
Mm.
have a. I think there's a. I think you
There is.
may
You
have a
touched upon something
here.
interesting there, but go. Yeah, go.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, sorry, what? Yeah, keep going. Hmm?
Oh
Oh
no,
no,
go
no,
on.
no, yeah,
I'm
Yeah,
yeah,
I
go, go,
just
go.
yeah, I just want to mention that that Clannad is not something at least I haven't really watched it to be completely honest, so I don't know as well. But at least looking at what I know about the show and what I've heard about it, I have no interest in watching it to be completely honest. So I think also some romances, depending on what it is, can appeal to different types of people. I just want to at least mention that, like for example, Nate was recommending Clannad. I think that's very reasonable because it is very popular and very notable in its genre, but also it can may not appeal to certain types of people. Because I think it's more at least with top lists. I have a few friends who really like Clannad, but actually they're pretty much almost all guys. So I've never seen many women who specifically say they like it. So I just
I
wanted to
mean,
Actually,
mention that.
Water is not wrong. I actually have the
yeah.
same experience. More guys like it. In the circles that I know who do like anime,
Yeah.
strangely enough, yeah, you're not wrong
Um,
about in my experience at
because
I
least.
kind of
I
see
mean,
why. Oh,
because
go.
the thing
You fine, go.
is, the truth of the matter is that Clannad was a visual novel that was
Mm-hmm.
made during a specific era where most of these visual novels were aimed mostly at men. I mean, it still has the conventions of every single girl has their own route, and of course, for most people or pretty much everyone, Nagisa is the ultimate end game. So
Mm.
technically speaking, if you really wanted to make a point that Clannad mostly appeals to men,
Yeah,
that's
it's a
not an
good point.
inaccurate statement to have.
Yeah.
It's not inaccurate. I just think it's the truth.
Mm.
Like, of course, that doesn't necessarily lessen Clannad's quality, but
Mm.
it's
Mhm.
clear who the audience for Clannad is meant to be.
Yeah.
And when I do meet, I mean, ironically enough, the people who actually introduced me to Clannad and Clannad After Story were women. I did learn of Clannad through women. I knew about Canon, yes, but I wouldn't have found out about Air or Clannad if it wasn't for the women that I was friendly with growing up. So there is a crossover for sure.
Mm.
But the thing is
Mm-hmm.
that I'm not too keen whether or not Clannad was fully intended to appeal to both genders in that respect.
Mm.
But I am of the opinion that it can kind of go both ways depending on who you ask. But I don't really think there's much of a debate on who it was originally aimed for.
Mm.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, it was
and
definitely
no, I
originally.
definitely agree. Hmm.
Yeah. No, no, yeah. Basically, what Kat was saying, yeah, just yeah. When you mentioned that, I thought, yeah, well, I guess the original plot structure of it is still from an adult visual novel, so yeah,
It's not.
I can
That's
see
not
that.
the issue, though.
Not
That's what I'm
necessarily,
saying.
But yeah, but I
That's
think
not the issue.
but I think when we like some of the DNA from that is kind of what, like you said, like the original thing probably more catered to boys, considering this, the one of the ultimate topics, thing with the game. So although the anime doesn't deal with that aspect of it, I imagine just imagine maybe some of that DNA just at least in your point of view doesn't correlate to you too well compared to like wow. That's
Yeah,
my thoughts on it.
because no, I definitely agree. Because like sometimes with certain romances, right, there's a certain lens that people view them through, and they can be influenced by what appeals to you specifically. So I think that's just important to acknowledge here. And I also want to mention a more recent romance anime that kind of covers a little bit after the acknowledgement of feelings, but not quite. It's a My Happy Marriage on Netflix. I wanted to
Oh
acknowledge
yeah, I've
that
been meaning
as
to
well.
watch that. Yeah, I've been
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, in essence, it's an arranged marriage, right? But both of them eventually learn to acknowledge each other over time because, initially with arranged marriage, often either party doesn't really like the other person. But by
Yeah.
trying to bridge the gap, even after their supposed marriage, right, is where their relationship does blossom over time. So it's not like, I don't know, I do agree that a lot of anime doesn't follow up after like the confession scene. I think that's particularly an issue with shoujo, I think.
Yeah.
Less with josei because they're often more mature.
Oriented towards adult women at that
Yeah.
point, like Rakugo no Shinju.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
also it's important to acknowledge the general audience that these are generally catered towards.
Yep.
Where a lot of like, for example, if you're in high school, right? It's really hard to really care about what happens when you're an adult if you're not an adult yourself, I think. And
Mm-hmm.
same with like, for example, I'm an adult right now, right? But I find anything related to high school is less and less relatable as
Yep.
I get older because not that I don't remember what I felt, but it does fade over time, so I don't really feel the same way as it did when I was younger.
There's
So
a
I think,
specific
yeah.
saying for that in Japan, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's usually that same nostalgia and sentiment. It's one of the reasons why so many anime take place in high school, because it was the last time of somewhat somewhat of a pure freedom
Freedom
that you
sort
would
of thing.
have before
Yeah.
you would commit your life to the workforce.
Yeah, it's like the prime time of their lives. Well, I think in America it's more high school, not a college, sorry,
College.
college. So it definitely depends on the culture here, where I guess like in a way, a lot of Japanese people see their high school time as with rose tinted glasses, in a way.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
They see it as
Yeah.
like the prime time of their lives. That's why it's so often in high school. It's like when you had the last bit of freedom before you're chucked into being an adult and having to deal with adulting
Spring
issues.
time of year.
And with your friends as well. And like also an interesting thing I'll mention too is that in a lot of Korean series I've seen, a lot of them are actually more in college. I don't read that many when I read like romances, right? Japanese ones definitely
Mm-hmm.
geared towards high school. Korean ones definitely geared towards college, which I found kind of interesting just because of the difference in cultures, even though they're very close to each other proximity wise. So, mhm.
Yeah. There was something that I wanted to address earlier. Um I think it's also like, another anime, like when Water mentioned shows that appeal to a certain lens. I was thinking, I was, apart from My Happy Marriage, I was also thinking of this other, somewhat recent anime that I feel actually appeals to both the male and female gaze. Sono Bisque Doll, or my, dress up darling,
Oh yeah,
if you're
that
all
yeah, I agree actually.
yeah, because one of the gripes that I had against romance in anime, there was like a point in my life watching at trying to look for shows where almost every romance that came out in the past few seasons that have become popular, or at least are remotely romance genres, is like the highest, the most broadest genre covered. It's usually like harem anime, and I have like a love hate relationship with a lot of harem anime, because while I'm not opposed to harem as a genre, my complaints about it is that usually the girls chasing after this one guy, it's either they're one dimensional, or they have the potential to be the most lovable girls ever, but they fall for this one guy who's like, really.
Yeah.
But and usually it's catered to the male gaze, the fan service, the excessive fan service. not complaining about it, but sometimes it's borderline excessive that
It's
it's
definitely
cheapened.
catered to the teens. It's definitely catered to like not only the male but like the
Yeah,
teen males,
Right.
the ones who just like
yeah,
just wish. Oh,
yeah,
you know what
yeah.
I mean?
Teen
Yeah,
male.
I can see that. Yeah.
The funny
And
thing about this conversation is that a lot of what that you're complaining about, Val, this was actually assessed in the '90s by a little known
yeah,
harem anime that most people are watching that most people don't watch these days, and that
yeah.
Was Tenchi Muyo. That show was
Mm,
very much aware of the conventions of the genre before it became mainstream. Like the
yeah.
name of the series literally means useless Tenchi. But the thing about Tenchi himself is that he's genuinely a respectable human being.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the stuff that he gets caught in just happens to be because the girls around him are like trouble magnets, and he has to pay the price every single time one of their past mistakes comes back to haunt them. But the thing about
Mm,
Tenchi is that he never really actively pursues any of the girls in his own way, more so than he just tries to keep everyone happy on an equal playing field. It's clear that
mm,
Ryoko and Ayeka clearly like him, and the thing is, I as the person watching this, I understand why they do have a soft spot for him. He carries himself with
mm-hmm.
respect. He treats everyone around him as a human being. Now, granted, he will get snarky because even he has
Mm-hmm.
his limits where he's like, "Okay, this is stupid. This
Yeah.
needs to stop." Like the characters within Tenchi, some more than others, they genuinely have their own agency. They have their defined personalities, and they have very interesting backgrounds. So it feels like there is this weird middle ground of yes, it's clear that the show is aimed for guys since it does have the harem angle, but the girls in the show are portrayed with a level of professionalism to the point where it's
Yeah.
like a lot of those same problems that I have for most harems I don't have it here for Tenchi because every character is
Mm-hmm.
defined. Even the character who that you could classify as a bimbo, I would argue that
Mm-hmm.
even she's extremely likable in spite of all of that.
Yeah, yeah. And yeah, that is true. Yeah, it's just that I guess, um part of like my rant earlier is that while I don't inherently have problems with, like a harem anime can be good, like stuff like Tenchi Muyo, and um off the top of my head, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I did enjoy Nisekoi.
Sounds
Um
familiar. I can't remember
because
what the
the
title.
because a lot of the girls were allowed some breathing room, I guess. It was one of the only fandom wars that I have ever actively participated in and
Oh
tried to
no.
destroy. But that's another story for another time.
Hmm.
But yeah, going back to like my dress up darling, like you know, I mean, it's sort of a harem, but not really like harem in the sense that there's a large female main cast,
Hmm.
but you can, when you know that the focus is like the main couple, like
Hmm.
Gojo and and I was like, oh, it's like the guy. I was like, yeah, yeah. Marin is very cute and she's sexy and she's like, she brings out my inner potentially like confused gay in me. But I was
Respectable.
like,
Respectable. I've been
you
there.
have
I've been there.
yeah, but then you have like I have always have conversations with my sister whenever we watch it, and I was like, "What the fuck are Gojo's classmates not into him? Like he's tall, he has broad shoulders. I mean, these are just the superficial ones, okay? He has broad shoulders. Have you seen his hand?
Oh
Like,
my
look at
Ah,
those hands,
we're
and he
we're
has
in it
a
now. Yeah.
soft
Oh yeah.
and nurturing. He's
Hmm.
he's like
I have
very
something to add, but
nurturing.
like
Listen, man,
I have
I'm
something
just
to add, but
saying he's a literal Giga Chad and y'all are sleeping on him.
Yes,
Yeah, he's
exactly.
like,
And it's like
yeah.
I'm
Oh, sorry, keep going.
simping over this guy, okay? I'm simping over this guy. Like, look at him. Like, like I'm surprised no one has gone gay for him.
My God,
He's
I mean,
definitely appealing though. I've seen it. Yeah, oh, sorry, keep going.
oh no. I was just agreeing. You're definitely right about that.
Mhm.
Because it's
Nice.
interesting because I want to mention that I think if I can remember, My Dress Up Darling, the mangaka is actually a woman. I want to just mention that.
Mm.
And that can be seen because of how she draws men a little bit.
Yeah,
Like
I can
be it
see
in
it.
both the male and female gaze. So it's just very refreshing because usually you find romance is either there for the female gaze primarily. Doesn't necessarily mean that men can't enjoy it, or vice versa, like for the male gaze and women can. But it's refreshing to see a show where it does showcase both, that it caters to
Mm-hmm.
both gazes. And I don't know, I just really like it. Yeah.
I
I have a
agree.
certain
It,
issue
it,
with
Like, sorry, yeah.
harems.
go ahead now.
One of the
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
the issue with harems is mostly comes from this. Sorry, I'm a bit sick at the moment. My problem with sort of harems is sort of like this sort of fantasy. Oh god, my brain. Sorry, I'm sick at the moment. Sort of like this fantasy idea of a harem, as in
Yeah,
like having a polygamous relationship with a lot of for one guy with a lot of women, and not addressing the consequences that come from
literally, yeah,
polygamous
that's it.
relationship like
That,
that.
yeah, yeah, right there. It's it's
So it's
it's
kind of
it's,
like a weird fetish of a
it's
sort, and let's just say anime is no exception to
yeah.
that.
It's the dream. It's the
From
dream. It's the dream without the consequences. Yeah, literally. That's kind of the bottom, the
mm,
top and bottom of it. Yeah,
that's all
they.
I wanted to add.
Yeah, no, they. Yeah, I think a lot of them, at least from what I don't know, because I don't really super get into like romances too much. And to be fair, I think a lot of romances, there's some good ones, but if you just were to pick them random, you won't get. They wouldn't be too good. But yeah, a lot of them, I feel, especially with the harem stuff, is kind of more catered towards the young, impressionable child, like teen, because they're the ones kind of like, oh, it'll be all. I don't know. I think they're the ones just raging hormones and no prospects, so they just kind of like, oh, I guess they'll gravitate towards it more. Typically, that's what I find at least. Yeah, that's what I want to say.
Yeah, but it's
sorry.
interesting how how we just discussed My Dress Up Darling, though, how it kind of leans into the gazes of both genders. And normally I don't like it when it leans into one or over the other, but it's interesting how we have a situation where all things are literally in balance here. I find that
Mm.
very interesting about this entire scenario.
Yeah, I would say
So
it's pretty.
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to the way how I see things. I don't think the male or female gaze are inherently bad. I don't think one is particularly worse than the other. It just
Mhm.
depends on the context and whether or not we're bringing up it in society at that point, which you could probably argue the male gaze is a more prevalent phenomenon, but I don't necessarily think it's inherently negative. Because the thing
Mhm.
is, we have to accept something about ourselves, and I'm just going to put it down on the table right now. We just like sexy things, all right? Let's just be honest. Men like boobs and butts, girls like them too, and women like broad shoulders, and they love chiseled chins. And guess what? There's some men out there who like the same thing. But
Mhm.
when that happens, do we then say that the man is looking from a female gaze if that's what they're into? You see, this is kind of why I try not to
Mhm.
fall into it too much, because
Yeah.
there is, like we've been talking many times before since we started, there is a spectrum to a lot of this stuff. So
True.
the fact that we have a manga that serves as a nexus point between both of these gazes, I personally think it's a case for why this stuff is not inherently bad, and it's something I wish I could see more of. Because I just
Mhm.
feel that at the end of the day, we better understand each other when we can actually view things on the same equal playing field. Like, look,
True.
if a story has both hot guys and hot women, I want to fund that. I want to throw all my money at it because I feel we're both
Yes.
getting something out of it. Not necessarily in the objectifying sense, but in the perspective of, listen, we both get to have a taste of what we both appreciate, and we can sit down and have a meaningful conversation about it. Or
Kai,
just
what do you mean you like Final Fantasy 7 and Final Fantasy a lot of games? Because I know they don't discriminate.
Yeah.
They go hot.
Hey, hold up. If you're gonna be bringing up Final Fantasy VII, I will bring up the fact that cloud cross-dressing is probably one of the most base things that was ever done in games, and it was done in the 90s, and they did it even better in the remake. Listen, people, I want hot men and women in my shit. All right.
No, I agree.
You had it here first, guys. You had it here first. No,
That's so funny.
Yeah, no, it is interesting. I think I definitely agree. Like, if you're going to like go that route, try to be as cognizant on both sides. But also, I think me personally as well. I think in some ways we do to a degree, but I think because 9 out of 10, I think men and women, how we see, like how we approach our preferences is not 100% the same. Like I think 9 times out of 10 males are more visual creatures inherently. Just look at any advert and look at what's marketed to them more. And female are more, I guess, more an emotion and more like the connection and the bond thing. I mean, just look at 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight. Like it's so we'll be marketed too. It's just most of the times it doesn't show necessarily equal in that right. But I do agree if you have both in your thing, I'm listen. It's all cool. But yeah, I just want to throw that out there.
It just feels like these things are better in balance, like most things in life usually should be. Like, there's so much from the female perspective that so many men miss out on. And when we do that, we end up limiting our worldview to just a binary path.
Yeah.
And it just, I don't think it's wise, because fundamentally we all have bits of the other gender in us if we're going to talk from a philosophical standpoint. Hell, you could argue that we have that stuff from a biological standpoint too. Yeah. But what I think helps is, I mean, look, a lot of the best aesthetics, depending on who you ask, turns out to be when there is a crossover between male and female. So that's when you get the whole androgyny thing. There was a time where the most ideal way to look was to strike a balance between the two. And I feel like since we have gone in the direction of one or the other, we've kind of forgotten that the nexus point between masculinity and femininity, the lines are not so cruelly defined, nor do they have to be.
I definitely agree on that, because at least I'll, like, for example, my preferences, right? Like, I mean, I like hot guys as much as another person, right? I also like androgynous characters as well.
Exactly.
But I do have to say, I do not like over-sexualized women. So that's very specifically because I am also a woman. So it's actually because of it that when I see women with overly big boobs, overly big butt, to me, it's like distasteful, or like it feels like there's a feeling of revulsion because it's just not appealing.
It's for the same reason why I've never. It's for the same reason I've never been into. I've never really liked bara. Whenever I see people eating that around, I've never been a fan of that either. Like I think when I saw my first bara cover, when someone yeeted it at me for the sake of a joke, I was like, is this how women feel when they see like the Amazon and the Sorceress or Dragon's Crown? Full disclosure, I love that game. I just want to throw that out there so there's no misconceptions. I love that game. But when I saw that cover, I was like, okay, I think I understand where women are coming from now. Whenever I see stuff like that, I'm like, now I understand why people complain about this.
It's kind of funny though. Yeah, sorry, keep going.
Oh no, go on.
Oh, I just want to mention that a lot of bars are actually written by men. So I found that kind of ironic, but it's also not wrong though, which is like, I don't really like overly muscular men either. I like hot guys, as mentioned, but I think everyone has their preferences. But I find that people who are too buff is just not my thing. Yeah. But that's just down to preference then, so.
Yeah. So it's ironic, huh? How the same problems just kind of loop back around. Like it's almost like a lot of we have the same problem on both ends, but this isn't necessarily a both sides issue. It's more like we know that there's a problem, but the thing is that when people start complaining, we kind of veer it off into another direction, and we don't really want to face it. We see that there's a problem, but what ends up happening is it turns into, well, you just want to change it at that point. And we're like, no, we're just pointing out that we just don't think it's cool, my guy. Nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah, I definitely do think that
'Cause it-
any extremes on either side. Usually, in most things, you go too extreme in almost anything. Even if something that Harry looks good, it turns out to not really work out too well in the end. So, not every single time, and also it depends on the person. There's always the odd person who likes it to the extreme. But
Right.
generally, you can make a rule of, okay, well, if this is going all to the extreme, perhaps it's not going to work out for the best. So yeah, that's kind of one thing I can keep in mind. Yeah.
Because like,
Yeah. Go on.
oh sorry, keep going. Oh yeah, sorry. I want to just mention that why a lot of Borrow is written, just to explain, is they're usually written by men because otherwise, usually when women write BL, right, they tend to make the guys incredibly beautiful. Well, the Borrow actually tends to be slightly more realistic and focus on masculine values a bit more. So I think that they're trying to cater towards their own, towards other gay men who have similar preferences, right?
Right.
And I think, or gay or bi, like in essence, they find those type of body shapes to be appealing, right? In a way, they're just trying to fill in the gap that isn't usually a preference for women specifically. And I think that's perfectly fine. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Because in a way, it's partially adding either being more realistic or adding to the fantasy, essentially, right? Because I read a lot of Bara as well, and it's definitely interesting because it's not always appealing, but I can understand why people like it, which is why I just want to acknowledge that.
Right.
I do have the, in a way though, it does contrast starkly to how a lot of anime does focus a lot on the male gaze. And because there's like a lot of dealing with sexual assault or groping, which is seen as comedic, or you have that old man who's a pervert, and like you have those type of things that sometimes are hand waved, which isn't okay. It's often just because of society or traditional values, right? Doesn't mean it's any less wrong. It's wrong for a reason, but it just sometimes when
I
you
think it's more
see that the male
cultural
gaze is
sometimes than I think that regards it's more cultural than traditional, because from my side, traditionals mean that you just very conservative, just do your own thing, whereas this is kind of more just like the culture and how they deal with humor and all that stuff, which I don't agree with, but I think that's just, I don't know, in my head that's how I correlate that differences between them.
Like you said, I do think it can go back and forth between either tradition or culture, but I think in the case of the old man groping trope, I feel that's more of a cultural thing more than anything else, because you will see that within many different properties. You'll see it in DBZ with my boy Roshi being the #1 example. Nothing I can do about that. Like whenever I talk about Dragon Ball or just anything, I always have to put the caveat that, listen, I love that guy. Jackie Chun is my man. I don't jive with him on the grope and shit. I'm not okay with it. Just he's still my boy. I don't like that. I don't rate him for that. But it more boils over to a cultural thing more than anything else, where it does become a traditional aspect depending on who you ask. It really just depends on how that person defines tradition at the time. Because from my end, if I could just bring a personal example out here, whenever I was growing up, I was often told that there's a specific expectation that a man has when it comes to a woman. A man is supposed to be doing this with a woman, this and that. Even you have to be a little bit forceful. And a lot of that does inform on how a lot of these characters get written, where it's like, oh, he's just being a man, he's just being a guy, that just comes with it. So then it kind of crosses over into the traditional aspect as well as the cultural aspect, because people believe that this is a traditional thing, and then once enough people believe it, then it joins the culture, and then we just kind of enter this feedback loop where this is just how it works.
Yeah, it's just regardless, it's still unpleasant because like
Oh,
the good thing
definitely.
about the old
Yeah, either
man,
way.
old pervert old man, right? That has phased out like 20 years ago, luckily.
Pretty
But
much.
it doesn't change though that sometimes like you do get the like not it's actually less popular recently. It's more popular like back then. But what comes to mind is for example, the Seven Deadly Sins main character
Oh yeah.
with how he gropes the
Yeah.
main female
Yeah.
character. That's more recent. It's an anomaly, of course, but it doesn't change that that type of thing is still very unpleasant. And
It's a bit of a holdover.
exactly. And also it sort of confirms that there aren't that many recently that do that anymore,
Mhm.
unless if they're specifically being faithful to the original, which
Right.
sometimes doesn't happen that often anymore.
Right. Like
But
you have some cases where older manga and older stories are being adapted for newer audiences, and of course, to keep track of sensibilities, depending on who you ask, a lot of some of the more problematic aspects, quote unquote, do get removed and phased out. Now, I'm of two minds on this. On one hand, there's some aspects that I feel should be maintained just for the sake of making sure that we can have a conversation about this, just kind of get an idea of what it was like in that era. However, though, this is where the other part of the conversation comes into play here. There's some aspects that may not necessarily fly well in as far as the shareholder side of the conversation is concerned, because they don't want to get too much blowback on the portrayal of certain things. Not necessarily for the whole, Twitter back and forth. Like, I just hate the fact that that has to join a conversation every time even the slightest controversy comes up about, the subject of how you adapt a lot of these older things. I think what people need to do in this situation, maybe not necessarily adapt it word for word, but if we do have to adapt it word for word, we need to be able to approach this in a manner in which we can have a healthy conversation about it. Because if we go through it from the angle of, let's say, we're going to start manipulating or changing some pages within James Bond because we want to be more appropriate for the time, that bothers me.
Yeah,
That
because
bothers
then when you give the go for that, then where does that stop as well? And then also you're giving a disingenuous reflection of history, which I think is in its own right just
Oh,
not fair
or
on
not, or
that
not
as
even.
well.
I don't really, not even just history. Not in the case of James Bond or anything. I don't really think it's a matter of
Yeah,
history.
not
I
just
just
James
feel
Bond,
it's
but yeah. Go on.
yeah. It's more of a. It's not, and it's not even necessarily a matter of authenticity. It's just, I just feel it's the honesty of who we're dealing with here. It's why I've never really liked the idea that some people are of the opinion that we need to rewrite Huck Finn. I don't think we should. Huck Finn is a story that is ingrained in the time it was written.
Yeah.
And it has to be experienced that way for the purpose of what the story is trying to convey. But now to kind of bring it back around to the old groping old man trope, this is where things get a little bit more nuanced depending on who you ask. Because the thing is, I'm speaking as a man here, so I can have that perspective. But now I have to consider what a woman's perspective on the subject is on myself. Because while I can mention that I am not okay with it, now I have to acknowledge the other side of the conversation and how a woman feels about the portrayal of Roshi in this context. So I have to ask that question as well. I know how I feel about it, but now I have to find some way on how we can meet in the middle, in which, if we still have a groping old man within this, how do we approach the subject from here? Do we keep it in all the way? We don't remove it? Or do we do we need to have a line that says, okay, we don't endorse this. This is kind of yikes.
because at least in my perspective, right? Like at like with Dragon Ball, right? Like if you count like existing works, right? Like it's a part of its time, right?
Right.
That's undeniable. And
Right.
we have the choice of whether we want to watch it or not. Like I watched Dragon Ball a lot when I was younger due to my dad liking it, so I mean it's to be expected, but I watched a lot, and luckily over time, when you keep watching it, when they add like Pan, for example, or they add other female characters, it becomes less and less necessary as like a humor gimmick. In a way, if you think about it, it's really literally just like considered a joke, right?
Right.
And then it
Basically,
becomes
yeah.
less and less necessary as the series goes on. So in a way, it also reflects how that type of behavior has been phased out over time, depending on because of what people tend to value more. So
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I know. My perspective on all that is like, for one, like I guess I've got to say, it's like I'm Muslim, so I just believe, in general, there are just some things that shouldn't be like me personally. I wouldn't write stuff like that because I just think it's just disrespectful. It's not right. It's not correct. That being said, now it's there. Like even for me, example, even seeing stuff like not necessarily good. I don't really not the most comfortable thing. It's just like, haha, kind of funny. So if it was regards of how it's to deal with it in society, I'll just be like, well, if I were to just go by Islamically, it would just be, well, I just wouldn't put it on afterwards. Like I wouldn't deny it existed. It exists to be that way, but I just wouldn't like. I wouldn't show. I wouldn't say show it to my kids. Hey guys, and make it seem like it's okay. Basically, best thing I can say.
I want to say something relating to the whole thing. Thing about like this sort of like like the pervert old slapping butts and whatnot. Let's start off with one thing, and that thing is that this is a very common trope with a lot of sort of what do you call it? Chaotic individuals, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
like
I know.
usually rockers would usually be like be the case for these types of situations. They tend to have a very like I don't care, f society and whatnot, and they have kind of like this renegade sort of behavior, a sort of very toxic behavior in most cases. I would say like I wouldn't say it should be something that would be banned, but I think it should be something that could be used as a sort of like a communication cue to understand an individual what he is as a person. That makes sense.
Yeah, no, yeah, like I wouldn't try to stop it as because I think like I might have said in another one as before. I think as writers we have if there was a job we have is kind of reflecting what's in society and show it kind of reflecting what's in society around you and kind of packaging that into some sort of form of medium to show, hey, this is kind of weird or this kind of interesting, or this kind of funny or whatever it is, and I think because of that we should have the license to deal with that, but also I guess with our own personal integrity and what we want to do, what our own personal integrity is, I think is what would guide us as a compass with that. So in that regards, you could, like, for example, I could probably use that in my story and I'd be fine with it because I'm using it in a certain context that fits my own beliefs and understandings. But then I wouldn't want to stop it to someone else from their beliefs and understandings and how they express it, because that way at least you understand where they're coming from with their thing, and then you can choose to disagree with it, or to agree or disagree with it. That's kind of my take.
Yeah.
Because essentially, in a case to describe it, I just had in mind of it, but I can't remember now. Hang on. The idea is that essentially that show this sort of behavior, and there was a very interesting topic that I remember reading up about, wherein saying that young, impressionable teenagers, when they grow up, they tend to stop looking at their parents for guidance and start to look for more sort of like hero characteristics or individuals that represent sort of like this self-identifying sort of
Oh
what do you call
boy.
it?
Yeah, that could
Oh
be its own
man,
topic.
Personality.
that is leading into some very
That is
relevant commentary today.
Yeah, that is a good topic.
I got to be, yeah, like that's a, oh man, like no, you're on some galaxy brain stuff there. You just brought up a really good relevant topic for
Yeah,
that,
that's
man.
a really good topic, honestly. Yeah.
I'm trying to hold myself back a bit because I want to talk about it, but
Yeah.
we'll be here
Honestly,
for another 3 hours.
yeah. Literally, I'm thinking that. I think
It's
the
just
moment you
that
said
it's a
that,
very
is another
interesting
topic.
topic.
Yeah.
It's just that it's a very interesting topic that kind of delves into storytelling, and in a way, it kind of like creates a narrative. Like for example, in for example, like cyberpunk, let's say, Johnny Silverhand is a very rebellious, very antagonistic sort of character, but at the same time you're kind of stuck with him in the game, in the story, and then you kind of start to sort of like try to kind of like understand him as a person and where he comes from, and you may not agree to anything he says, or you could agree to him. It really depends on your personality. He comes off to me. I know a guy who is literally, I would like compare him. I know this one guy who's like almost identically similar to him, and it's almost really funny how similar he is in terms of behavior, even though he has never known about the game whatsoever because he
Interesting.
doesn't care. um, but it kind of like shows like, would I say he's a like a genuinely good person? I mean, I wouldn't say he's a great person. He's a very flawed individual. Let's put it that way.
Mm,
Makes sense.
mm, mm.
So yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know. It's a bit hard to really describe it because like people like, do I commend, for these guys to, like slap them in spots and be like, no, absolutely not. If I would tell kids like, don't do that. That's like not okay. Just because some rocker guy who thinks he's cool doesn't mean that's a good thing.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah,
You
but yeah, you bring a really good point about like how it's just like how like they're more impression at their age, and then they look at like stuff like heroes and that, which brings we're gonna do a topic about that definitely another time because I can go to the whole mono myth and. I talked about the hero of 1,000 faces a bunch of times. This is literally the bread and butter of it. What you talked about there, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, I'm gonna hold myself back. I'm gonna just leave it. I guess with this topic, is you guys got any closing thoughts?
On what topic exactly?
Oh, with the what was the last topic we talked about? Was it about? No, we went past romance. We kind of talked about. We were talking about boy stuff. What was the last topic? Just before we talked about like about how it affects society. We were talking about.
Hmm. We were talking about romance a bit.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, yeah. I felt like led in something else between there, but yeah, basically we're talking about romance, the last one. So any closing topics on that?
So just to kind of what I mentioned earlier, I personally just don't really romanticize romance. I just kind of keep things as on a relation basis as possible. So basically, what I feel, if you want to write a convincing romance subplot, in my opinion, I feel like you ought to kind of veer away from just a raw romanticization and just focus on what does the character's relationship mean to them. What does it mean to them in this particular scenario? Like, how do their lives inform how they interact with each other? How do their circumstances inform that? And of course, how do their personalities clash or jive? You have to think about all of that if you want to have good chemistry. It can't just be as simple as we're eventually going to hold hands and call it a day.
Mm.
It, at the end of the day, really should be about how do these characters come together and where do they fall apart.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. You gonna say something, Water? Or
Oh no, I was just
sorry.
I yeah, I mean, I guess what I could say is that like I do agree. Um, and I feel like we covered, I think for the most part, a lot of things regarding romance.
Yeah.
I don't really have much else to say about it because of that. But
Okay.
yeah, I think we did a good job. I don't really have much else to say, at least on that end. So
Okay.
Yeah.
I know worries. Actually, no. I kind of remember the last bit just before how it led into the how it affects society. It was kind of like talking about stuff that was inappropriate, like stuff like about get Master Roshi and that stuff. I think that was the last bit before. But I guess I'll give my
Mhm.
last piece on it was
Mhm.
yeah. I think romance dealing with it in stories is really good. Like it is a really good storytelling trope, and you know, and it's really good showing like different like relationships and stuff. But I feel if you're going to, well, I don't have rating rules on it, but I feel like if you're going to do it, try to do it in a way where you're not just thinking about. Well, I mean, you can do to go for the the whole the chase and that stuff. But I think something you could do more interestingly as well is try and think about what happens afterwards. Make that compelling if your story can call for it, because again, like we said, especially a lot of stories will just kind of it'll end after the chase, and if the story does continue after the chase, it's kind of a bit bland, and if not, it's either bland or just really bad shallow melodrama. It's just like, oh, what is this nonsense? It's just like terrible. So try to think about it's not as soon as they get together they walk off in the sunset and that's it. No, like there's gonna be challenges. There's stuff. Don't mean just because they get together they know everything about each other. There's a lot they need to learn about each other. If anything, you can almost say the learning really starts after the fact. So I guess try and think of it like that. I think another way to help that is with like think about it. I think if you can make a good friendship, I feel like if you can make a compelling friendship with them, then the romance part will not say sort of selves, but I think I do firmly believe that making a friendship is harder than doing romance, because romance is kind of just is adding it's one added layer to the friendship, which takes more work. So yeah.
One more thing to add, last thing to add actually. On my thoughts about romance as a genre. I wish and I really, I hope that writers, whether it's for shows, novels, anime, whatnot, I'm really hoping that romance as a genre get gets its ultimate redemption, because to be very honest with you, I'm not a huge fan of the genre, especially in the mainstream. Like I like romance, but what do you call this? Like I guess my opinion on it has been influenced by a lot of what is being advertised in young adult fiction lately. Um like when Nate mentioned like how it's more challenging to write friendships as opposed to romance. I don't know if I understood that correctly, but in a sense, yeah, it is more challenging, but at the same time it's kind of like sad to know that romance in media has been reduced to just the chase, to
Yeah.
just the tension between two characters, when in reality, as addressed by Kite earlier, like no, the romance was, in real life, it's more than that. It explores a lot of things. Like at the very core of it, romance is essentially a relationship between two people. Like it's a friendship with the added perks of, of flirtation, of attraction, of but at the very core of it, it's no different from the deep bonds that you have with your friends and family. It's just that there's a lot more intimacy involved. It's meant to be more intimate than the others type interpersonal relationships a person could have with other people. The problem is, with the romance as a genre nowadays, especially among adults, or young adults and onwards, what's being advertised to the lot of us is usually it's sex, just just
It's
the sexual tension.
yeah.
While it's not wrong, there's nothing wrong with that, but if it's at the forefront of the romance, and
Yeah.
like you can't remember anything other than the characters having the hots for each other, um that's a
I'll
big
be
problem.
I'll be honest. I feel like they're more advertising lust than love. I would even.
Yeah,
I'll
that's
be
the
real.
problem.
I wouldn't even. I wouldn't even really put in a real that same category. To be
The
honest.
problem
Yeah.
the problem that we have, and I swear to God, I'm not one of those reject modernity and return to tradition, because tradition has its problems too. But the fundamental
Mhm.
problem that a lot of people have these days is that we're being marketed attraction based on lust, among other things. And the thing is
Yeah.
that I like eroticism by default, so I'm not a prude by any means of the imagination. But what I
Mhm.
don't like is when relationships just get reduced to just the carnal side of things. Like,
Yes.
I think
Yes.
the carnal side of things is very steamy, and I love that. But the problem is, it's kind of like, let's say for example, you get like a slab of Kobe meat from Japan, right? It's some good stuff,
Mhm.
really high quality stuff, and you're just eating it straight. You're probably getting a very good experience out of it, but if you don't have anything to put it with, you're starting to lose some of that flavor, some of the really some of the things that make it sing. You're basically getting it flat with no seasonings, nothing else. You're just getting the texture.
Mhm.
So you're getting the texture of the carnal stuff, but you're not getting the other aspects to make things sing. That's what's happening,
Mhm.
and it's why I really don't like this the whole thing with YA or even new adult, where it's like we just have this really weird portrayal of how these characters are getting down and dirty. We just have this very weird way of doing it. It's one of the reasons why I don't have any abject sex scenes in my book, just
Mhm.
because why not? If there's anything like that, it's usually implied or it happens off screen. Not because I'm afraid to write
Yeah.
one, mind you, but it's mainly because people have a certain expectation when they come into this stuff, and what they
Yeah.
want is, well, that. And that's fine. It's not inherently a problem. But a lot of that gets preempted by some of the most one-dimensional stuff, or just, hey man, we know how it works, here's the formula, here's how you get to success. And I just don't like it. It just kind of feels
Yeah.
like I would be adding to a problem that I already don't like. And again, it's
Mhm.
not like I don't like smut, I do, but the problem is people's view of this stuff is informed by smut, and that's
Yeah.
not good. That's not
Mm,
fun, man.
yeah, I agree. Cause sorry, I was wondering if I could just add on to that just a little bit more.
Oh, sure,
Sure.
yeah.
'Cause for example, hmm? Sorry, did you say want to say something, Nate, or?
Oh, no, no, I said sure, sure. Sorry. Yeah, my thing's very delayed.
Okay, yeah, okay, cool. So I want to break up the appeal of sex into two different parts, right?
Mhm.
Usually,
Mhm.
when sex is used as a narrative device, right, it can be done as solely for pleasure, which is like people who have one night stands, right? People who just don't want anything that's lasting, but just want something that's like temporary and essential, right? You find
Yeah.
that a lot in often it's like a catalyst for a lot of romance. It's like sometimes people just have sex with each other, they have no idea who they are, but they just, oh man, it feels good kind of thing. And there's a lot of people who feel like that. Like I don't know if I mentioned this before, but I have a friend
Mhm.
who she lived in Aruba, right? But all the guys who wanted to date her only want to have sex with her. And
Mm.
it's not a completely wrong thing that doesn't exist, which is why I want to mention it.
Mhm.
That some people only want sex for pleasure. But there's also the people on the other side, where people use sex as a way of sort of like a pinnacle or a sort of a continued acknowledgement of
Mhm.
like a couple's affection for each other,
Ah, yeah.
especially since it's so vulnerable and it leaves you so exposed. So in a way that can be seen as pleasurable in its own way. And also in a way because of that, it also can be abused. It could be also toxic. You could have the guy literally punishing the partner in sexual acts because of a so-called love. The love is not like mutual. So
Mm.
in a way, like sex is obviously overused in society because there are plenty of people who only care about pleasure. That's just as
Mhm.
it's one of it's a human thing. I mean, what do you expect? But like but it is a device that often isn't used well or is done
Yes.
in a way that it feels shallow, which I
Yeah.
think isn't particularly wrong in some ways, but it
Mhm.
can feel that something's missing, which is something to acknowledge. But I think sexting shouldn't be completely discounted as a plot device, but it's
Oh,
often
Yeah.
not used well, which is
right.
why it can be seen as lacking. So I just want to clarify on that a bit more. Mhm.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I'm really
Right
glad
there
you
with
brought
you.
it up, Walter, because you know, yeah, I especially agree with the topic of sex being used as a narrative device. I guess like I actually want to cite an example later on that I feel is a very good example of romance where sex, whether for good or ill, is used a narrative device that actually serves its purpose. Like, like I have no complaints that it's there, but I'll mention that in a bit. I guess my complaint with a lot of the mainstream, like, I'm kind of like a kite. I don't have issues with smut whatsoever, but because it can actually be, it has potential to like um add to the narrative, to add to make the dish delicious, okay, like to
Yum.
reinforce the romance, as
Mm.
long as it's done well. Like I mentioned earlier, the problem with I have with media is that it kind of, sex is being misused, and it's becoming the only thing that defines romance for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of people, which can
Yeah.
become harmful.
Mhm.
And it which can become harmful, it can influence a generation's view on what love should be about. When the thing is, we should when the thing is, I wish writers or romance writers advocated for promoting a healthier view on love, sex, relationships, yada
So
yada. I feel that's really important, especially since a lot of this is now being marketed to younger adults and teens who are transitioning to into adulthood,
Exactly.
like
Like,
Mm.
I
Mm.
feel like it's very important that we should encourage the types of content, but the problem is, in general they don't think it's marketable.
It
Like
sells.
for
Mm-hmm.
example, on platforms like TikTok, for example, someone writes a young adult novel or a romance story, and the first thing that people ask in the comments, yeah, but what's the spice level? How spicy is
I
it? Like,
hate
what
it so
Mm.
damn much. I hate it
first
Yeah,
so
that's sad.
much.
ask? Like,
It's
why can't
sad.
you ask if it's a good story first? Like, bonus if it has spice. Like, I don't care. Like, look, if you like spice, fine. But to determine the quality of a romance story based on how much spice is in
Yeah,
it, like,
yeah,
it's
come
sort of like
on.
That's
Or
depressing.
it is
an
sad.
Yeah.
intimacy of
Vegeta,
it's
what does the scouter say about the spice level?
It's over
It's
it's
all.
sort of
Okay.
it's almost in a sense it's kind of like sort of what do you call it, um intimacy of a physical
Mm-hmm.
intimacy rather than actually an
Yeah,
emotional one, which
yeah,
is a
exactly.
Exactly.
completely
Yeah.
different one.
God, that
And,
Those two are completely different.
and
Yeah.
it's
You
so
can put
not
yeah.
higher
fair because
prostitute and you'll get what you want.
people sleep on the
Yeah.
mental and psychological side on it so much.
Yeah.
This is why
Mm-hmm.
I tend to like fanfic that are written by women because I
Mm-hmm.
typically get it from there. That's where I
Mm-hmm.
normally get that spice, and I love it.
It
So,
also kind of just
Mm.
loses its value in a sense,
yeah.
because if you don't have
Yeah.
any emotional attachment to a person, it kind of loses its value, and it
It's
almost
it
in a sense
almost I
becomes
almost feel
meaningless.
like I hate to say it almost feels kind of self indulgent and selfish. Ultimately,
In a
if
way,
you
Yeah,
take
yeah,
it
no,
to
yeah,
you
yeah.
extreme,
no, you'd be
because
right.
It
because
is
then
very
it just
much
comes
so.
about you and your own
Very
pleasure.
good.
You know what I mean?
And the
So yeah.
worst case scenarios, it almost becomes so bad that it may even just become like, if there's an argument between two partners,
Mm.
the partner who's not really emotionally attached is going to be completely indifferent about the whole situation,
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
if
yeah,
that
because
makes sense. Because he's
yeah,
not emotionally, or he's not emotionally attached.
yeah,
Physically, sure, but emotionally, not really.
yeah.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm. Oh, sorry,
that
keep
being
going.
said, like, sorry, was anyone gonna say anything more?
Oh, that was me. I just wanted to mention something, but you can keep going.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, because I want to mention it at the very end. Like I
okay.
wanted to provide
Mm.
like an anime I can think of.
Okay, yeah,
That yeah,
yeah, cool. Because
Okay.
yeah. So I
I'll,
I can mention that later down the line because I want to like expound on it a bit more. So yeah, a bit
okay,
later. Yeah.
okay, go
oh,
for it. Yeah, because I'm gonna
okay.
probably close off in a couple, like maybe 10 or so minutes. So yeah, yeah.
I'm
Okay.
prob
Oh,
So
I'm
so I'll just.
probably.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
sorry.
sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. Go on.
Oh no no. I just want to just do a quick introduction, but otherwise
Mm.
yeah.
Oh, Yeah. What I wanted to say is that I'm gonna be dipping out a little early. I'll be gonna be hanging out with some friends tonight, but I just wanted all to know that I had a lot of fun today. A
Yeah,
lot of
Yeah,
this
I
was
was
a
able to
fun.
catch
This
up.
is really good, honestly. Yeah, and I literally I wrote
Yeah.
down the effects media can have on the youth for like another topic because I think that was yeah, that we need to touch upon that at some point. I think
we
that was really
really
good.
really do
Yeah.
no, you are on some galaxy brain stuff, man. Nothing but
Mm,
respect.
mm,
Mm.
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I guess since we're about to like disband in a bit, I feel like I need to bring this up now. So I
Yeah.
guess
Yeah.
from
Go bring it up.
we're the topic of like sex is like used as a narrative device, I guess. I can't help but think of like Scum's Wish, like
Mm.
for all the complaints that I keep hearing about it, like like how they hate this one character from that one show.
Mm,
It's actually one of the very few romance animes that I've seen where this thing about the complications of love, of desiring someone else who belongs to someone else, and
mm,
people doing very awful decisions, and that usually leads to physical intimacy with people who they don't necessarily love. I feel like that's one of the few anime that addresses that and doesn't romanticize, that actually addresses very hard and heavy topics about love and sex. And I feel like I wish there
mm,
were more of that, like
mm.
you go ahead, add the spice if you want, but do it in a way that makes people think about
Keep it, yeah,
something
exactly. Keep it
other
real,
than,
just a surface,
yeah,
yeah, sort of surface level,
yeah,
yeah,
keep
yeah.
it real.
Mm,
Yeah, so
Mm.
yeah, that's this is the thing that I wanted to say basically. Yeah, so this was a really nice conversation. I'm really glad I caught up to the topic about romance because it's one of those, like, it's the genre that a lot of people, whatever sex you are, that like to consume,
mm,
may not necessarily be the main genre that a lot of people like, but a lot of people can appreciate it, like generally.
mm,
And yeah, I hope to like see like somewhere down the line this genre, like that people explore the
mm.
potential of
Yeah,
this genre even more beyond what
yeah.
is
The
we commonly
superficial and
see
stuff, yeah.
today.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Mm.
Yeah, true, true.
Mm.
Yeah.
I
Would,
was wondering if I could just add on just a little bit, real
mm,
quick. It won't take too long. Um, is just add on just to the topic of sex, right? Is the existence of sex friends, for example, which I think is kind of an
Yeah.
interesting thing to cover, where
mm,
Indeed.
pretty much there are two people who mutually only seek each other for pleasure, right?
mm-hmm,
Yeah.
But sometimes like it ends up actually breaking things down where there are actually some people who are dating, for example. But if one party only wants to use the other person just for sex, essentially, right?
mm,
In a way, it creates an uneven relationship that breaks it, just
mm-hmm.
because it just feels like one person is just used for something
Yeah.
else, and they
Mm,
don't want that.
mm,
Or some people are, just have sex for, sex friends, right? But they also one person ends up catching feelings, and
mm.
the other person may also catch feelings, or they may just shut them down and then they break off.
Because they
In a
don't
way,
Yeah.
want that, and they don't want that extra that burden on top of it.
Yeah. Don't want the
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's
responsibility
sort
of
of
actually, yeah, of being intimate with someone like that. They just want the carnal pleasure, which is yeah.
Because the boundaries have to be drawn somewhere. It's one of the reasons why I'm not really against those kind of relationships, insofar as both parties know what they want. Because the problem is that people assume that just because they're doing it to that capacity, they're like, hey man, like we should probably go all the way. No. For some people it's just we want to express ourselves like that, and then we just want to go about our days just like with no extra strings or anything. Because
hmm
what people like what I mentioned earlier is relationships make you vulnerable, and when you
hmm
open up to someone like that, that's scary. Like some people would say, well, you're opening yourself up like that, then what's you see, that's the thing. People have different levels of vulnerability, and people just don't consider that side to be that debilitating. But if you are opening yourself up emotionally like that, that's where it's gonna hurt a hell of a lot more, because it's not just you saying, "Oh, that was just my sex friend." Now it's like, well, that person was someone I was really, really close to. Most people don't like that pain. I'm speaking from personal experience, by the way. That's personal experience on my end.
Yeah,
But
I don't know.
yeah.
I've never, because obviously because of my upbringing in religion, I never really dealt with those inherently personally myself. But just off my head, it just I struggle to see how like you like for you to get out of that without honestly any issues at all. You gotta be some really mature or something. Like you gotta be really like put together. And I can't really say anyone's super put together. So I think it must be really hard for anyone to come out of that without any like they can go in agreeing, okay, we agree to this and it's fine, but then like
It's
down
like a
the
friends with
loan.
benefits scenario.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think it's like
Yeah.
friends with benefit. Yeah, I don't know.
I think a problem with this is that I am a little bit, how do I put it? I'm not really sure how I feel about it, because in a way it's like, well, people say that, it's like they know what they're doing, but sometimes, do you really think that sometimes even the most adults themselves know what they're doing a lot of
Exactly.
times?
Yeah. Like you asked
You know?
nine people out of 10. Oh, if they even something like drinking, you ask 9 people out of 10. Oh, can you handle your drink? Is anyone ever gonna say no? No, they can't unless they really had some crazy experience and like, okay, fair enough. No, not really. So I don't know. It for me, I can't see how that's super sustainable. But anyway, like
It's sort of
no
like
one's perfect anyway. So
it's
it's
sort
fine.
of like, I don't know, it's just a very weird polygamous relationship again. To me, it just seems, it's like I don't really understand it, because if somebody starts to have any attachment, well, let's just say no attachment. Let's say both parties are not attached to each other at all. Don't you think it's going to cause some kind of psychological damage eventually over time, when you will start perceiving this sort of thing as maybe something less or maybe something more? Maybe one of the people will. What if, like, let's say one of the partners is going to be, all right, I'm good. I'm going to move on to the next one, or something like that. And then will you never ask yourself, why did he decide, or he or she, why did they decide to just leave? Was I not good enough?
Exactly.
Was I
Yeah.
not appealing
I
enough?
just that's what
Did they leave me because,
yeah, that's why
yeah,
it doesn't mean it's
because
just
it wasn't beneficial,
yeah, in my head that's
Yeah.
why I think it's that I can't see it just doesn't I can't see how that works ultimately.
Yeah,
Mm,
because that's the funny thing, because in a way, if you only focus on sex, it can actually be emotionally damaging, which is why I wanted to mention it. Because there are people out there who only want like an outlet for being horny, essentially.
Yep.
Like if you can't do it yourself or you can't use toys, then I guess they gotta find some other way, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, but it can cause damage, which I think also
Yeah.
shows why the overemphasis on sex can cause damage. So I
Yeah.
thought that was just
Yeah,
mentioned at
yeah,
least.
definitely. Yeah, but I think with the whole site thing, we'll definitely touch on it next time. I think right now I'm gonna probably close it off here. I think it's a good place to close it.
Sounds
And
good.
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, no, guys,
This was
this
fun.
was actually really, really good. It was a really good topic, and yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
thanks all you for coming. Thanks for coming, RT. Sorry if I didn't say I didn't want to like call you out. It seemed like you were just chilling there. But yeah, you were noticed. Just yeah, thanks for like.
I was just listening.
Yeah. I thought so. That's I didn't want to like call you in if you want to chill. But yeah. Thanks for listening. And yeah, I'm gonna close off. So thanks guys for joining. This is the Lounge Podcast. I think episode 15. And I will see you guys next time. Take care. Bye.
See you badasses later.
Take care.
See you